Myself, Prasoon Sarkar. I'd like to introduce myself on 3-4 parameters. So first, I belong to a family of refugees from Bangladesh, 1947, educated in Banaras Hindu University, genetics and plant breeding. I have gone through IIM, learned a bit of economics, gone through ISB, learned a bit of leadership. But what I learned was with the farmers with whom I have been working at close proximity for the last 25 years. And what I could help the industry do is in the last 7 years as a transformation leader, I was working with World Economic Forum, creating public-private partnerships. And that's something which is transformational in a way, because otherwise we all work in isolation. And as long as you are working in isolation, your inputs is very small and your output is even smaller. If you can bring it together, like the 5 fingers, if you put together, you get a fist. So if the corporates, the governance, and the civil society, they start working together, the impacts on the ground can be very, very disproportionately bigger compared to what we are getting today. And that is where we need to think, we need to open up. So openness is something which I would like to talk about. And in this session, we are going to take a step, a slightly different step in terms of moving away from technology or scientific innovation and invention to how we can link it to market and make that generate some amount of revenue for the farmers. Because at the focal point of all our endeavors is the farmer. And if he is not convinced, he is not making money out of it, whatever we think of, he is not going to implement. So having said that, it's an honor for me to be over here, and thank you, ICRISAT, for having me. I'll request Mr. Selvaraj, my co-chair, to briefly introduce himself, and then we will go for the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Prasoon, for giving us a prelude of what is going to happen in this session. I am Aravari Selvaraj. I work as a CEO of the Agribusiness and Innovation Platform of ICRISAT, which mainly works with startup companies. And we do also carry out some of the R&D activities, especially on the food products related to our mandate crops. And we also closely work with the farmer producer organizations across the country. So with this background, I think without much wasting time, since this is, as Prasoon mentioned, like this is a session which is totally different from what we have been hearing for the last 1.5 days on the technical front. So this is going to be interesting also. And some of the participants, when I interacted with them, they also mentioned that this is what ultimately translate as a benefit to the farmers, to the stakeholders. So in these sessions, we are going to deal with the agricultural waste, food safety, market linkages, and entrepreneurship development. So this session again is broken down into 4 segments, wherein we have eminent speakers from the industry. And this is a session wherein you will find all the participants who have worked in the industry, who understands the market, and who have prior experience in running similar type of activities, especially when we talk of market linkages. So some of the speakers, they have been running their companies on the ground with the farmers, engaging at a back end, and in the forward kind of engagement with the consumers, with the customers. So it will be a really an enlightening session for us. When we talk of concepts like natural farming, regenerative agriculture, we need to know what is the market potential for it. How do we get into market? How do the farmer position their products? How do the entrepreneurs get into business using this opportunity? So this is what we are going to learn from this session. So if there is permission from the chair, we can move to the speakers. So we first invite Mr. Rajshekhar Reddy Seelam, who is the founder and MD of Srita Natural Bioproducts Private Limited. And I think most of you are aware of the company and their products, which we call it as 24-lettered mantra. So this is one of the pioneering companies who have entered in the organic products market. So he is going to share our experience and actionable strategies for strengthening the value chain of natural farming products for export and domestic markets. Mr. Reddy, now the session is over to you. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the intro, and thanks also for inviting me to share our experiences and views. So to tell a little bit about ourselves, we are a farm to fork company. We work with about 35,000 farmers on 2 lakh acres in about 12 states. We train the farmers in organic agriculture, and then we get it certified and then buy it back and then process into various products. We sell in India. Today, we are available in about 550 cities, towns, and we export the brand to about 40 countries. So I'm just giving the context so that from my experience, whatever I'm sharing, you're able to relate to. So what I'm going to talk a little bit is about the consumption trends within the country. I guess one little macro picture would also help this people in this room to understand it better. Second, what the consumer expects, and then a little bit about the domestic market structure, export market structure, and then on the availability of the produce and the way forward. So I think today India is a primarily consumption-driven economy. About 60.5% of the GDP comes from actual consumption. That is you and me buying various goods and services. That's what's contribute to the economy. Then about 20% of the top households consume about 50% of the, have the 50% of the consumption. Second, I think the middle class, obviously the middle class definition initially when a lot of this MNCs came, their definition was different, but our definition is different. But I think it's true that it's growing at 10% CAGR. And today we have about 42.5% of the households which we classify as lower middle income. And then another 30.6% as middle and upper middle income. And so if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, the poor or whatever we call, that is shrinking, and the middle layer is growing. So that's a good sign when we talk about products which are a little different and perhaps a little more expensive, then people have that kind of spending power. And the other important factor is nuclearization of families. Earlier, I think 20 years back, you still had a lot of joint families. Today, about 74% of the families are nuclear families with an average about 4 to 5 members in the family. So which is good, because when you want to take a decision about a new product, if it is a joint family, then there's a huge negotiation. Here, I think it's the spouse, both spouses decide, and then you're on. And of course, in our experience, we find that men to be more experimental than women. Obviously, more women working. So to that extent, convenience becomes more important. And second is obviously the woman doesn't have to every time refer to the husband to buy something, can I buy kind of thing, because you have your own income. And obviously, COVID was a big change. There are a lot of behavioral changes have happened. I would say a lot of it has stayed, particularly in terms of concerns about health and safety kind of thing. And if you look at the food and grocery market, it's about 40 lakh crores across the country. And within that, the packaged food, when I talk about packaged food, I'm not talking just about the Maggi or a snack pack, etc. But it is even the staples, which is your dal, atta, chawal. There's just about the market size is only about 6 lakh crores, which is in 2015, it was 14.5%. And in 2020, the growth was not much. It was just 15.5% of the overall market, but it is expected to grow to 20%. So out of this 20%, 10% is the snacks, the other things which you talk about. But the balance 10% is your dal, atta, chawal. So there's a huge transformation which is going on. People are slowly moving from loose to packed produce. Because tomorrow you want to sell a product like natural, organic. Obviously, if it is a loose product, it's very difficult to identify or label it. So to that extent, it really makes sense. So I guess in terms of a lot of this demographic or social factors, etc., a lot of things are favorable to experiment with some new things. And the other important driver is health and wellness. Today, it's a 60,000 crore market, and it's growing at 16% CAGR. So it's expected to be 1,27,000 crores by 2025. So that's the other piece of statistic. So where I think we were talking about people being wanting more healthier products, better for you products, etc. So the categories in this are basically fortified food, functional food, free from this, free from that, whatever, natural, organic. These are the categories which contribute to this. Then, so obviously the opportunities are, one is in-home consumption. And today, I think with the Swiggies and Zomatos of the world, out-of-home consumption has also dramatically increased. Earlier, perhaps we would go once in a fortnight outside for as a outing. But today, I'm sure we consume outside food, perhaps most of them would consume at least a couple of times a week. And in fact, I know a lot of youngsters, married youngsters who don't have a kitchen at home. And then office is the lunch, and then dinner and breakfast is a lot of times Swiggy or a Zomato. So they say, why should we do when so much variety is available outside? So that's a fact of life. So I think the categories which would benefit from is the staples, which is your dal, atta, chawal kind of thing, dairy, ready to cook, frozen. In fact, I think all of you, one tidbit is most of the time what you consume from Zomato and Swiggy is not freshly cooked. Most of the time it is frozen, heated and given to you. So, okay. So home food is the best food. Yeah. So now coming to the consumer, I think a lot of times, I'm in a lot of these kind of forums, a lot of times people invite me and spend time, etc. And we keep on talking about production. I'm also part of the little bit millet movement, closely involved. And next year is the International Year of Millets, 2023. And we are only talking about production, but we don't know how to sell it to consumers or educate consumers about millets and then making them consume. So I think a lot of times this gets missed out. I think when it comes to the consumer, it's fairly simple. What they're looking for is value, right? I'm paying a X price. Do I get a right value for that? Second is transparency, because I think we try to market and we talk about stories, but then the stories have to be real. It can't be made up stories, right? And third is trust. Today, I think we are in the organic food category. We have started in 2004, it is about 18 years. And even today, I think a lot of people still don't know or still ask, how do I trust that this is genuinely organic? So even after so many years and we being there and plus so many others being there, this is a question which gets asked. Which is a fair question, because obviously everything you find in the market is not genuinely organic. So that's a big issue, not only with organic, but with a lot of products, because about 16-17% of food is adulterated. Now the adulteration could be simply adding a color. In fact, today I think we have reached such stage where even a fennel is colored with color. Because you want bright green. So obviously bright green you don't get naturally. So they put color and then people happily consume. So a lot of those kind of things are there. So that's why I think trust becomes a very important thing. So how do you develop this trust within the consumers, among the consumers? And finally, I think today, given our stage of, let's say, evolution as a nation state, whatever you call, so today, I think the most predominant thing is what is in it for me. If you're going to talk about a lot of global goals, ecology, this, that, it might be factors, but after it satisfies and then make sure that it satisfies my requirements, then okay, that is a nice thing, but not necessarily a very important thing for most consumers. But hopefully, as we go along, that will change. But because particularly millennials, the youngsters, millennials, they're that much different. So hopefully things will change. But as of now, this is where we are. Right. So whenever we talk about anything to market, so obviously we have to talk about the consumer, and then how do we make sure that the customer, we are able to satisfy these things. So a little bit about the domestic market structure, because ultimately if you want to market this, then you should also know how the whole thing works. Because you have the farmers who produce, then there are trader aggregators. Now, based on the area and then the kind of crop. There could be 2, 3, whatever in the chain. Then you have the manufacturers, distributors, then finally the retailer. Retailer, now you have 3 formats. One is your supermarkets, which you go. Then second is your e-commerce now. So e-commerce is still small, but I guess now if you look at the organized market, right, when I talk about the supermarkets, today food and grocery, they account for about 7 or 8%. So balance you're buying from your kirana shops. Of course, most of the people in this room would be buying mostly from supermarkets or e-commerce. And e-commerce today, food and grocery contributes about 1 or 2%, but it's growing fairly fast. And I guess COVID again has accelerated things, etc. But this is the structure, right? And today, if you look at this is the model. And I think though a lot of retailers have come in, a lot of manufacturers have come in, but none of them source from the farmers directly. Most of them depend on a trader or aggregator. And that too, perhaps they would have passed already changed 2 hands or 3 hands. So then how do you sell something like natural and then create a market? A direct sourcing from farmers, that's what I said. And then today, none of these manufacturers or retailers have really any big incentive to source directly from farmers. Because one is it's very painful aggregating, let's say, a few quintals from different farmers into one truck. In fact, I remember when we first started, we thought Orissa would be a good bet for organic farming. And then we were climbing up mountains, crossing streams on foot, etc. We did that for 1 year. At the end of the year, we realized that we couldn't even accumulate one truck because everyone, the marketable surplus was in kgs, not even in quintals. So it's pretty hard work. Even now also, our typical average of our farmers is about 5 acres. And if I have to aggregate a truck, then I have to buy from 5, 10, 20 farmers based on the kind of produce we have. So it's quite expensive. So that's why I think a lot of companies don't want to invest in this. And second is obviously there are a lot of regulations like Essential Commodities Act. So today as an organic company, you have to buy everything as soon as the harvest happens in 3 months. Otherwise, the farmer is not able to hold and then he will sell off. But if you have to buy this, then you have to store this also, right? Because I have to buy for the entire year. Now you have an Essential Commodities Act which suddenly says that, okay, dal prices are going up. So there's going to be a stock limit. You can't stock more than 100 tons. We require a few thousand tons of each commodity. So it becomes a very legal gray area, right? Then, so a lot of issues happen. And then if some officer wants, he can really trouble and then make such a big nuisance. So that's why companies don't want to get into this. So we have to also look at changing some of these laws if we want companies, organizations to be involved at the grassroots level. When it comes to the export, I think every time I go and then everyone talks about exports. So today, I think most of the exports which happen from India are ingredients. Last year, I think we exported about $50 billion worth agri products. And then out of that, a significant portion is rice. And a lot of that rice is PDS rice, which has got exported. Right. So I'm saying these are issues are there. I'm not, I don't think the government, which need to be addressed. And the branded is very, very small. So perhaps we are one of those few companies among others who have really worked hard in developing our brands abroad. But I think that's the way to go so that you realize much more value for what you're selling. So the major challenge when it comes to exports is one is you need to conform to importing country regulations. Today, you say it's a regenerative agriculture or you say natural agriculture, etc. No one cares. Because worldwide, if you're talking about this, they only talk about organic. That's the label which is used. We are unnecessarily confusing with labels, natural, organic, because ultimately the principles are same. The practices are also same. Because I think I hear this false narrative saying that organic means you have to use organic inputs, natural means no inputs. Today, actually, you go, no farmer uses any inputs. The best case, in the most, the input used is biofertilizer, which is absolutely recommended. And in an extreme case where they are not able to control pest disease, like Ramanjali was saying about it, you use some of these biological formulations. But it's also very rare because you have to work on prevention through either crop rotation or taking precautionary measures much before the pest attack actually escalates. That's how organic and other things work. Yeah. So, so you'll have to confirm. So if you want to export to US, then you have to and say organic, natural, whatever the only term known is organic, and it has to conform to NOP standards. If it is EU, it has to conform to EU standards. Right. So if you're not, then you can't export it as organic or a value added, whatever. And today, even in India, as per FSSAI standards, you can't label your product as natural. Right. So I think this is something we have to be aware. And then, of course, competitiveness, Indian products competitiveness is a big issue for a lot of categories. And forget about organic. A lot of times, even conventional exports gets rejected because of pesticide residues. So this is a big issue. And this is perhaps where natural also will be able to play a role, even if you don't say that it is organic or whatever. But if you are able to at least reduce the amount of pesticides and other chemicals used and conform to the importing country standards, that itself is a big opportunity. And microbial contamination is another big issue. So at the farm level, this happens. Then people are asking for traceability now. And the social standards, like I think today we want to export, we work with some of the major retailers. So they come and do a social audit of our factories. Whether I think we are treating our labor properly, we are paying them fair wages, whether we have the right facilities for them, so many things. There's so many audits like that. And of course, gap audits at the farm level, etc. So I think what is feasible is, one is organic. And perhaps when we talk about natural, then we may have to tag along with fair trade, sustainable. And of course, export as conventional produce without those residues. To that extent, exporters are helpful, and the tie-up with exporters will be helpful. So these are the three opportunities I see. So the way forward, obviously, is today, I think we as a company been 18 years old. We started in 2004. And with so much hard work, we are able to reach about 2 million families after 18 years, right? And I guess the total industry, everyone put together, will be about 3 million families. So but definitely the addressable market even today for organic, a premium product, is about 25 million families. So there's a lot of hard work going to be involved. You have to have a narrative. You should be able to communicate to this customer in a very clear manner. Because if you confuse the customer saying that this is organic, this is natural, this is regenerative, this is XYZ, first of all, even after 18 years, a lot of people still don't know what is organic. They say, okay, it's pure, it's organic, it is natural, it is organic, it is something else, it is organic. So I think all these things are there. So we need to be very clear with our communication. And for this, if you have to develop this market, then we have to work with brands, retailers, exporters, educate them what is being done at the field level, and convince them to work directly or indirectly with these farmers, and then put those labels and then start selling. So obviously we'll have to develop aggregators who only aggregate these products and they don't contaminate with anything else. Then we have to develop enforceable standards, procurement and quality systems. Now, I think we already have two standards, organic NPOP standard, then there's a PGS standard. Now we are talking about a natural standard. So we are not investing in developing or enforcing any of these standards. Now we have already jumped to a third standard. So I think we need to kind of little bit step back, make sure there is one standard, whatever you call, whether it's natural, organic, doesn't matter, but make sure that it is something transparent, enforceable, and which the consumer can trust. And other important thing is ensuring traceability. This is very important. And the amount of effort we put talking about production, we should also put same amount in educating consumers. Because if commerce works, farmers win. If it doesn't, then the government, whatever support they do, ultimately will not last long and then will not work. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. That was well in time and very crisply put across. I'll request Selvaraj to.
So we have our next speaker, Mr. N.V. Ramana, advisor of Samunati Financial Intermediation and Services Private Limited. And he's going to talk about inclusive business models for scaling regenerating agriculture, potential role of FPOs. So his experience of working with FPOs, as mentioned in the earlier session by Mr. Reddy, saying that it is difficult to work with individual farmers. So obviously FPOs are going to be a solution. So I request Mr. Ramana to brief us about what all the opportunities this FPO has got in this regenerative agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Yeah.
opportunity given.
Sir, you have 20 minutes, so I'll raise just before 5 minutes the
Sure.
note to you. Thank you.
I don't have too many things, but I'm going to make certain things. They don't have too many numbers, and they're not. It's more of an approach that we need to do for this, because last 2 days I've been listening. Because I'm coming here, I also read about regenerative agriculture. And as many people found, I mean, even here people ask the question in the almost last day, saying that it is confusing what is regenerative agriculture. So let me say that Samunati started with saying that we work with make markets work for the smallholder farmer. It actually means, how do you make a 500 kilo producer in this country who constitute 80%, and how do you work with them? So we only figured out only way to work with them is to do aggregation, then market linkages and advisory service. Advisory service is not just because they do not know what to grow, but how to grow and which type to grow for which customer. So we follow a value chain approach. For example, if I give you maize is not maize, because there are 1,200 products and each value chain has its own structure and its own quality, and it has got its own breed. So you have to work with that, with the consumer in mind. And rightly, I know Rashika for the last so many years, they have been very specific. And in this country, many of the tribal, hilly, dryland agriculture, they are naturally organic. And that's the starting statement. And aggregation market linkages are important because it's been an issue for everybody. Wherever you go, you end up with a market. And market is not a general place. It's a very specific, what consumer wants is a market. That market is limited to that customer. And advisory service is required to make these two things happen, because awareness of the farmer is very, very important. And they are not in a position to invest anything on these linkages. So today I'm looking at inclusive business models and scaling for this, I'm calling regenerating agriculture, and some of the potential rules, how you can use FPOs. So I looked at regenerative, it looked very simple. If you just do this, is it okay? And then I figured out, by the time yesterday evening, I figured out that it's very complicated. There is no, everybody, it is like definition of livelihoods. Everybody in health, education, anything you do, they said, we are working for livelihoods. It's the same way. Every good natural farming is regenerative agriculture. So let me think little differently. 100 years back, what we were doing. There was no pressure on wheat, there was no pressure on rice. So we were eating the naturally grown organic food. And even 40 years back, when I first took my job, I remember in Mehbubnagar district, the farmers in Meganur area, they divide their land into 3 parts. One is for their food and cattle feed, which is like jowar, bajra, whatever they eat. The second part used to be for a cash crop, for the cash expenses like cotton, tomato, whatever vegetables. The third one is they used to leave it free. For next year, they put the cattle dung in it and use it for the next year. And this is true for even US, where 3% of the people do farming. They have so much arable land. For a good crop of potato, they live for 2 seasons before they get a good crop. And that's true for even in the areas terrace gardening, still they do. Where the forest, they leave the land. So it has been a culture from the beginning that we do natural process, and that's how the work lived. But because of our population, there was a pressure on food. So the production has become a target, and that continued to haunt all research institutions. So we compare with other country in terms of yields, they are different. We are 60% dry land agriculture, and you compare with where they have plenty of water, not comparable. So I'm saying the one is, it's not so simple as it looks. That's what I figured out at the end of the day. And then people talk about sustainability and regenerative. I thought in a short way, while on the right side, you see so many regenerative their number, the actual circles can be about 30, 40. As I think end of the day, keep hearing there are 30, 40 of them, which they call themselves working towards regenerative. But if 38 to 40% of the land has already become depleted of its topsoil and the nutrition, there is no way you can make it sustainable. So you have to first regenerate it and then add it to the current one and maintain the current level of the land of sustainable nature, and then continue to the sustainability. So for me, sustainability is a bridge, and soil-based, rather seed-based rather than a soil-based rather than seed-based. That means we have been looking at a seed, bring hybrids, get more things. So, but you have to see now we have a rich land so that you should be able to produce on regenerative agriculture. This is another thinking or a realization I had. But you see, there are many P's. I thought I selected 7, but there are, I think, 20 today. But what is more important for me is regenerative agriculture calls for a collective and conscious activity. So there is no way any individual project can work towards this regenerative agriculture. It has to be as somebody else also pointed, it's a way of life. If you implement all the things that were discussed in the last 2 days, it becomes your way of life, right from morning till evening. But will that stop? I don't think so. The reason is, I think Rajshekhar put it very nicely for me, because if you can produce very good product, but if the ecosystem is not with you, and agri ecosystem is very, very complex. That's what I have realized in the 40 years. It's difficult. You take one area, we are talking about soil, we talked about 3 days. So like that, simultaneously, there are 100 conferences across India working on these all ecosystem. So right from you have one side on the financial, which is required for this kind of anything that you do in agriculture. Then you have these mandis on one side, then you have FPOs, SAGs on one side, then you have enterprises, many of them producing, processing. Then you have these startups, the new animals that have come into the field, they're making things happen like that. We were taking 7 days for a soil testing, they'll do in 2 hours today. From the satellite, they're able to give you the values. They're able to test a lot of things that is required to standardize stuff. Today, they're able to make it through satellites and through things. I mean, are they 100% correct? But they are indicative. They're reasonably good. So there the agri-tech people have come, and technology is something India will adopt very fast. Today, nobody pays in petrol bunk with cash. Everybody is on the app. Bananas are bought over the app. How it has happened is the digitization. So I'm just saying, can agriculture take this? He talked about B2 commerce, I'm skipping. And there are a lot of institutional players in the market who also play a role as a buyer. So I'm not talking about the commerce, but I'm talking of technology. So how does this technology can be applied on this so that the research is protected and translated into the people? So let's start. I think morning, Sir was talking about, Katyal Sir was talking about watershed programs. How were the watershed programs were successful? If we start looking at it, it was more of a water users associations, which was a Centric, and all the programs were executed through them. So that's the how, and that's true for the rest of the program that were there. There was a central point. So can you look at any farmers collective as a land users association? They are the people who are using the land, and then take them as a Centric, and then start doing on the whatever you want to do as a quality products, as a land users association. It could be an FPO, farmer collective, it could be independent farms, or it can be a PAX, which was also a land users association, by the way. But only they started with finance, but they couldn't figure out the commercial way to sustain. So we have a lot of cooperatives. So all of them are the land users association. We will talk about FPOs, but they are the people who can be used as centers for whatever you want to do in inclusive business model, where you can't reach the individual farmers. What you can do is you can reach these people to make them work. Then green certification. I think this is something I just wanted to say. This is a good lead. And in the afternoon discussion, I was thinking that all the processes you're talking about, 2030 can be given a certificate, whichever way you want to do, what standards you want to do, you can do. But in India, if you want to start, 2 major things for a premium market or for a export market. Let us look at let me say three. One is a residue certification and give them a rating, and green certificates, I call them. Then you have somewhere where there's a gap following good agriculture practices, which they're asking. Europe is different and everybody has their own. Same with fair trade. So these are 3-4 certifications which you can do. People will get used to these certifications. Otherwise, you buy a TV, how do you buy? You look at the certification, you buy a AC, you buy even you go to a restaurant, you go to mall, you look at the ratings, right? So these ratings have become something part of life today after pandemic. And then certifications are required for specialty food, because every youth today, or everybody, he's talked about the farmers, the families which are nuclear, they all look at the ratings before they buy anything. So why not these agriculture produce have a rating? And you want to, you have to make the incentives aligned. You don't give money to the farmer for whatever suggestions that have come in the last 2 days. If there is no incentive to do that, either through market or through schemes or through subsidies, but it will have to come. Premium and domestic markets, I think I'm not saying so much so, because the produce and all this, they require these certificates, including people are asking for traceability. Now you may say it may take 10 years. I'm saying it won't take 10 years. You put them, digitize from the first level, and to spend time in digitizing. Today, Samunnati has done at least 2,000 FPOs who are fully digitized. Every farmer's name, his know your member, their own crops, what they grow, what they have, what kind of market alternates, everything is digitized. It's not impossible. It takes about 25 days to digitize the whole FPO system. So these are the 3 things I'm saying. One is make the farmers capable, and enabling environment, and willing buyers, willing to pay. The buyers need to be willing. That means actually, if they can't buy at that price, you figure out how to subsidize. You are doing export subsidy of 4% EPC, then export subsidy of something else. You do that. Do that to agriculture, no? Exports is under Commerce Ministry. Only APIDA is under Commerce Ministry. There is no other gateway for us to even approach and appeal. All the time we talk about fertilizer subsidies. Where is the export subsidy for agriculture products? Whatever you're suggesting, if I'm following, where am I getting the incentive from? So I'm saying FPOs can play very, very critical. First, the first part is the business model. I said how you make them inclusive is doing a certification process and making an aggregation points and follow what customer wants. That's what the gap is all about. Or that's what the traceability is all about. They want. The second part, how the FPOs can play a critical role. Quality of land, they can do it. If they want to do it, and you have seen this in the seed industry, for last 60, 70 years, organizers are giving 20 rupee commodity, they're selling at 1200 rupees, but they're organizing by paying 20 to 30% premium to whole village is adopting the same seed. What stops us from doing the same thing for a regenerative farming? Give it to agency. I'm saying give it that your seed agent can be FPO. You give the incentive, whatever you want to buy from him, and buy the whole village or the farmers of the crop to the same cultivation, same methodology, so that you buy it back. And I'm not telling something new which is not happening. They are not doing in Brazil and bringing back to India. All the seeds, hybrid seeds, they are doing in India only. But the farmers' incentives are allied. That's why they are doing. Then excellent platform for improving soil health. They are the people who will be able to do whatever you want to say. So you have to strengthen the FPO system. I'm talking of collective FPO, I'm using it, but it could be any collective. I'm neutral to that. Then protection of protection and storage of inputs that are generated. I'm saying they can generate their own inputs, vermicompost, then even earthworms. They sell at 2,000 rupees or 200 to 1,200 rupees a kilo. Some FPOs can undertake that. They're all a business point. They can make vermicompost and sell to the fellows, other villages. So then waste to wealth models. Every city in India generates so much of organic waste. Except few places, we don't do anything but to burn it or make it into a sand pile and put something there. We are finding it difficult. But if we can get this organic matter back to FPOs, they will be able to do it, use it for their own, for vermicompost and give it to somebody. Or even do it within the flats and then give it back to, it can be sold. Today it's available in Amazon, the vermicompost. You can figure out a marketplace. Today, place is not a problem, distribution is not a problem, logistics have really improved themselves. So the next one is the waste to wealth I talked about. Then multiple cropping crop rotation, which I talked about, which was a natural farming, you'll have to go back where the dryland agriculture is special because you can't do much for them. Then aggregating of crops into marketable lots. I think this is something I figured it out that unless you aggregate of a truckload. So I used to work with so many NGOs, maybe over 1,000 of them. Everybody said marketing is the problem. I said, you give me truckload, I will sell it for you. But the truckload is a concept, means, like he said, 20, 30 kilos in tribal areas, you can't bring. Today we work in Northeast. The pineapples there are costlier than the local pineapples coming from Bangalore. Logistics have improved much, but the production and their logistics, 25 kilometers means 3 hours. So it doesn't make sense. We have to figure out a localized solutions, agroclimatic basis, and what needs to be done in that region will have to be done. The surest way of regenerative agriculture, I told you, some of them are repeating whatever it's worth. Land use, then farm-centric. Basically, I'm saying that you can have a total traceability for specific farm product. And then you give that to one FPO and control them. You can't do many FPOs doing things. If there's a different product to the nearest buyer, you can figure out that's something you can do it. Then farmer-centric digital ecosystem is something I'm saying that please start with that. Your logistics have got digitized. You can call for an Uber. You can call for, you book your tickets yourself. You're not going to travel agent. Everything is digitized. Digitize the basic farm and farmer's land. And FPO is the right place to do it. When I'm saying again, I'm repeating, it could be a cooperative, any farm kind of a collective. Then input providers, biopesticide, earthworms, etc., they can produce in the farm. Whatever the morning, afternoon I've seen, all the Panchatantra, what is it, Pancha Kavya, all of them can be produced at an FPO level. Farmer produces at his own level and he can produce in surplus. People who do not want to take, the other people can take it. Then we're talking of it is a center. You look at a FPO, not all of them, some of them as your resource centers when you're doing this work. Because those are the people who can do the advisory and also implementing agencies for you. While you do at first level at the research stations, go back to FPO, work with them. No, they are the aggregating point. They are the farmer's face. The more you start working with them, at least they will become more, what I call confident of doing things. It's commercially viable. There is a viable business for them to do. And you can tell any advice. They will not do unless it makes sense for them. It has to give money, translated into money at some point of time. So I'm saying regenerative agriculture movement is a way of life. We have to go back. If you want to implement this, to go back to people, because people are doing everything there. No? People from Rolls Royce have come down to cycling. Huh? They're going, people are eating millets because doctor told them to eat so. We got so much of wheat. Now people are saying don't eat wheat, don't eat rice. Some countries producing quinoa, which is a high water consuming crop. Millets. He himself said he's doing it, but let's do it more systematically. This year, first time we are doing GAP accreditation, at least about 150 farmers and also some producers and processors. This is something you'll have to do. And non-farmers should be willing to pay. And in COVID time, people are really willing to spend their expenses on the food items, especially for the clean food or good food. From a 10% to 25%, it has gone because they have reduced on transport. They have gone not going to restaurants. So this is something you can cash on, and people who are non-farmers should pay for it. But anyway, they're only 40%. So, but still, for food, I think people would be willing to pay for that. Then certification process is something I'm calling green place, whatever is the want you do. But we need to move towards it very, very quickly. And I'm saying next policy advocacy, I'm saying is that we need to work towards certifying what we're doing. So sir was saying there is no way to measure, there is no way to do. But then how long we want to advise something which is at a close condition? It has to be at the farm level. Take the farm, take 10 acres and then do there. Thank you. I finished 1 minute because if there's anything else, I need to clarify or we want to do it later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will take the questions later.
Okay, thank you.
But you have actually covered probably a wider gamut of entire thing, talking about sustainable farming and how it is going to come from regenerative agriculture and then into the certification process and subsequently into how customers should treat the product in terms of the price that they have to pay. And probably, I just have a thought in my mind, why not talk to bankers and see if a certified farmer who is getting certification from many organizations or maybe multiple organizations becomes credible for a credit, bank credit.
Bank, DST, 50% guarantee for this. We already done it. But we talk about the finance because when you start seeing community as a finance, they are not. Imagine out of 6,000 crores, 1,000 crores to and more than 250 crores to.
Thank you. We'll look at Samandati at the larger picture. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We have our next speaker, Ms. Likita Banu, who is the founder and CEO of Terra Green Organics. And she is going to share her experience and strategies for promoting entrepreneurship in regenerative agriculture.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just to introduce myself, I am Likita Bhanu. I run an organic food company called Terra Greens. We are a baby version of 24 Mantra. We do exactly the same, but at a smaller scale. So we work with farmers, we train them, we procure from them, process and package, and then distribute under our brand. We also trade in agri-commodities and we also package. That is just a bit about what our organization does. After, like when I was invited here and I read about this term, regenerative agriculture, I thought it would be like sustainable agriculture. I didn't think much. And last night I was like doing some research for the talk today, and I realized it's a lot different and a lot much, right? So it is so technical and it is so, I think it is beyond organic, beyond natural, that what regenerative agriculture is trying to do. And then I thought, oh my God, what do I come here and say? I'm sure all of you know so much more about this topic than I do. So I thought that with the topic that has been given to me, which is strategy and entrepreneurship, I wanted to talk to you about business. I think Raj sir said, and a lot of talk about this, is that we need to know how to sell. And we don't sell in an isolated system. We sell in an ecosystem. So I just wanted to talk about how we can bring about a certain change as entrepreneurs and as businesses so that we can aid the conversation that is happening at a scientific and research level. So again, I like to keep things simple because I like to believe I'm not that smart. So there are two words: sustainable, regenerative. Sustainable meaning something that can be maintained. Regenerative meaning something that has to be generated. And what I realized is that 10 years ago, sustainable made sense because there was still something that can be maintained. But today, businesses, people, governments, everyone has done so much damage that we have to regenerate. And that has become the talk of the hour. So when we come to this, what I have realized is that we do need to go that step beyond, and we do need to think about businesses. Yes, of course, there's sustainability. And now there is this greenwashing of people saying, I use a brown paper bag, so I'm a sustainable company. I give that 1 rupee or if you buy this product, then I'll plant a tree. So we are a sustainable company. So is it really enough, right? So when I look at a business as an entrepreneur, I see that we need to break it down, make it simple. So I just wrote down some notes last night, and I thought that, we should look at the 4 Ps of what an organization does and break it down in a way to set intention to create a change. because I feel that's the most powerful thing ever, is to first set intention. By having this conference here today, the first thing that we are doing is setting intention to talk about regenerative farming, to talk about going that extra step to make a change, right? So as a business, what do we do to do something better? So I just broke it down into 4 things. The first thing without which a business can't exist is product, right? All businesses, we all sell products, but we not only sell products, we use products and we also discard products. So when we look at this particular thing that we do, how can we make it better? Being from a sustainable organic agriculture field, I can happily say that I'm very proud to say that my product is in some way contributing to the regenerative agriculture space. But when I look at my packaging, when I look at the things that we discard, when we look at things that we can reuse, reduce, and recycle in our own organizations, I think there's so much more that we can do. Like when we come here and we say, hey, you know what? The research institutes need to do XYZ. The government needs to create this kind of policy. I feel as entrepreneurs and as businesses, we need to take some sort of responsibility to make sure that what we sell, use, and discard also does not create havoc in all that is creating good in the world. So these are the 3 things I think that if even budding entrepreneurs look at creating change, I'm sure there's a lot of strategy. I'm sure there's a lot of opportunity that is there in terms of packaging, in terms of ensuring waste management, etc. The second thing is the process. When we talk about traceability and supply chain, why it's so important to have traceability? It is because we need to know whether where it's coming from. Second thing is whether everybody in the supply chain is actually helping our cause. Just standing here and talking about the cause does not make much of a difference. But do we actually buy from vendors who are practicing fair trade? Are we buying from farmers who are practicing organic ways of farming? Do we go out there and actually train and support and encourage? I think these are the things that we need to ask ourselves in terms of setting up processes to, again, to make sure and use things to their optimum level. The third thing is people. As a business, we work with 3 people-based organization. That's vendors, our own people, that is the employees, and the third is our customers. Vendors, again, we need to vet our vendors, make sure that we do business with people who mean good. People, again, the people in our own ecosystem need to be trained and need to be equipped with enough knowledge to be able to buy into the dream of making a change, and the customers as well. So when we do go out there, marketing and sales are so important to make sure that the conversation in the community is alive. Again, when we say that we are going from natural farming to organic farming to regenerative farming and to X farming and to Y farming, we need to create value. If there is no value in what we are doing here, then nobody is going to come to us and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to pay you an extra rupee for this. So to have that conversation on every level, whether it's a vendor level or our people in our organization level or at the consumer level, is very, very important. And the fourth thing is policy. Now, there's a lot of talk, I'm sure, here about government policy and how, like, everybody, all the big people in the world can make the difference. But I think as business owners, we all run a small organization wherein we can make a difference with policies. So I think that as entrepreneurs, we should do that, to create policy that make change and aid conversation in our own little ecosystems. These are 4 things that I think we need to take onus on ourselves to do. And again, conversation and community is something that we can build, we can actually engage in, so that the questions can be answered with the right source. And of course, I think being from an organic food company and being in the space for the time that I have been, what I have learned is that we need to constantly develop and be innovative in the way we address our challenges. When we set intention to make sure that the environment is protected, to make sure that we are true to the cause that we started out with, I think we get innovative. We do that extra thing that makes us different. And that's what we need to focus on. Like today, the market is such that, we moved from e-commerce to quick commerce. We're too busy to go pick out our own vegetables because we prioritize things like watching Netflix over the environment, right? So I think that we need to make these little conversations. Why do I need to use 100 times more energy to bring a packet of rice home when I can plan my groceries and go to the market once a month? These small changes are the conversations businesses can have. And with the economy that we have today of startups, they are just fueling bad habits. And when it comes to a bad habit of sitting on your couch and ordering whatever, whenever, using petrol, using people, and using resources, somebody has to pay. And at this time, the sad part is the people who are paying are the farmers because they don't get the price. They don't get anything. We get our packet. We are getting all the discounts and all the convenience. But at the same time, please remember that whenever you make a choice, somebody has to pay for it, even if it's not you, right? So as businesses, I think first thing is to set intention. Second thing is to have conversation. And the third thing is to bring it to action with these 3 Ps that we have in our own control. So with that, thank you so much for having me. I hope I added some value to this. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very crisp, and you very well spoke about the intent. And of course, you closed with the sensitization, which of course is very important as we go forward. The civil society, we all have to be sensitized to how we are using the conveniences, whether it's healthy or not, and how that benefit is trickling down to the last mile, which is the farmer. So we'll go to the next presentation, I think.
Thank you. So we have our next presenter, Dr. Kk Singh from Zuari Farm Hub. And he's going to talk about agricultural waste and its utilization in regenerative agriculture. Dr. Singh, towards the end of 15 minutes, I will show you this 5 minutes slide. So, thank you.
Thanks. And probably I'm an odd man out in this session because I'm not an entrepreneur, neither I'm going to talk on marketing. I'm agronomist by training. So I'll be talking much on regenerative agriculture and then how the farm waste can be managed out of it. Before I start, I just wanted to say one word taken from the Atharva Ved. And in the morning, one of my friends said that a lot of confusion is there regarding regenerative agriculture. I think it is already there in our minds, our ethics, our literature. It is said in Atharva Ved, the 12th chapter, it has 63 verses on earth and agriculture. It says, it is very known one. And it is I think it should be remembered by every one of us. It says that this earth is our mother and we are the son of that. So if you are a son of a mother, you will have to take care of it. It has generated you. You are born out of the soil, born out of the earth. You are going back to the earth only. The new sons and the new mother will be there, sons will be there to take care. We will have to pass on the knowledge to the new generation, the new farmers, the new age farmers, you can say, or the new generation altogether, you can say, that how to protect, how to do the farming or whatsoever we are doing. Not only farming should be regenerative, or our action should be regenerative in nature. And it is, the nature itself is regenerative. Most of our body parts are regenerating. So nature's nature is regenerative. We need not to be confused. Let's be more understanding. We are all work in progress. Human being is always work in progress. We are developing from childhood to this. We are understanding something. Today we are understanding regenerative as a term. I think it is there already. We are just putting the puzzle, the jigsaw puzzle kind of thing. We are putting the pieces together, trying to. Next time it will be again jumbled. We'll try to put another thing and we'll try to form another shape and size. So with that, I just wanted to take it forward on the topic itself that talks about the waste. And what we called about waste, I will just talk on a little bit on the agriculture waste management. And a little bit, I will just put my opinion on the regenerative agriculture. My means I have not derived anything, any definition kind of thing, but what my understanding, what I have gathered in the past, and it will be much more refined when I will be going back from this conference. I will be working more on that. And then agri-waste management in particular reference to the regenerative agriculture. So I will be just highlighting that it's a huge waste we are creating, and it's a process that the waste will be created. And if we go by the law of mass conservation, there's a very basic law of science that nothing can be created, nothing can be destroyed. We have all learned in our school days. So it is, nothing is waste. We have to recycle. We'll have to put some processes that this material goes into the process that remains in the system. Nothing is created, nothing is destroyed is the science. So we will have to keep that. When if it is creating as a waste, how we are going to make it best. So that is what I understand, that this waste terminology, we should convert that. It is an excessive, which is we are having through a process, and we will have to make it a part of the whole production system. If you call the agriculture production system in this particular reference, or any production system, whether it is a factory or a farm, we should have this in our mind that this needs to be recycled. Even in the factory also, the wastewater is going to be recycled. It has to be treated and utilized back into the system. So it is not that it is only to be done on the farm to practice the regeneration. So this is what the vastly it is waste which is being created during the harvest, post-harvest, that is in terms of residue. There are certain livestock waste we call. We'll have to call for the matter of convenience waste. Otherwise, we should not call it waste. And agro-industrial waste, where the processing industry creates certain things which are treated as a waste, which are also a value. A rice bran is a waste, but it is a value. Sugarcane trash is a trash, but it is a value. A molash is a byproduct or a waste, very difficult to handle, but it is a precious element. So all these things are there. So majorly, I will be focusing today not on the food waste, which is contributing largely with, yesterday we heard Dr. Lal also was mentioning that it is a crime and it is almost 30% food is getting wasted. I am not going to touch upon that, but simply I will highlight that waste also getting generated mostly and being highlighted that it is only in the cities. Every village, every household is generating. And if we see that what is being generated in the villages, particularly in our case, where it is a hot and humid condition, where the food is prepared and kept for morning food till evening, the people in some of the families are consumed and some is thrown out rightly. So that is what we will have to consider into that. It is much a bigger figure than the 30% probably. So if you look at it, the major contributor is the cereal crops, rice and wheat and maize. Beyond that, the sugarcane also is there. And then if we see that 70% contribution is coming from that kind of traces, and in that way, India is producing over 500 million tons. It is an old figure. I think that it should have crossed 600 or 700 around that It is an old figure which had been quoted by the NPMCR. For a reference, I had to take some published data, and that is the latest data that was available. But it is much beyond that. But we can understand that what is the quantum of this kind of residues which are available in the Indian farming system. Coming to regenerative agriculture, it is not only that we are talking to understand and to organizing this kind of conference to understand that what is regenerative agriculture. I came across a review article, and that says that over 222 articles, only 22 provided an approximation of the definition of regenerative agriculture. So, and you can see that the graph shows that right from 1982, this regenerative agriculture term has been used over the years, but there is a spike from 2015 onwards. So it has become like, don't mind if I say that sometime back the sustainable agriculture was the word which was used as a prefix for everything we used to talk about. Now, probably this should not reach to that level. I think regenerative agriculture should be taken in the right spirit, and it should be practiced rather than, we can just keep on putting as a prefix to some of the comments. And as per the FAO, what has been put forth, I think this is the simple and the broader understanding. I'm not calling that this is a definition, but the definition gives you an understanding that what we are going to have, what is the object with that, the dealing is to be done with that definition. So it says that the holistic farming system, which we had been talking since last 1.5 days, and that it improves water, soil quality, and it is taking care of the biodiversity also. So this is what needs to be kept into mind, and it should be just a guideline and kind of principle kind of thing that yes, and beyond that, whether whatever terminology we can use that organic farming, nature-based farming. What is unnatural in the farming itself? If you are putting a few grains of chemical fertilizers, it is becoming anti-nature. It's not, I don't think that. I mean, what is the chemical fertilizer? It is our muriate of potash is coming out of a mine. It is again generated by the nature. What is the urea? It is organic by nature. It is carbon and oxygen's bondings and hydrogen bonding. What is unnatural into that? What is poison in the fertilizer? So let's think in that direction. These are my views which I share, and I keep telling at different fora that fertilizer should not be taken as a part that it is going to ruin the soil health, or it is going to destroy the environment, ecology and all. It is a debatable subject. I'm not going into that, but I am just pointing out that we should keep the things into the in a right perspective, and we should have our own wisdom and study the very right word, and the very emphatically it was told by Dr. Lal also, that it is the judicious use that counts, and anything is in excess is a poison. If we do 100%, there is a literature I came through across an article, a scientific article, that if you go by 100% using the organic content, what would be the production? I mean, we'll be getting that. I mean, if you grow everything on the 100% organic manure. So these are all the extremes. We should find the scientifically proven fact-based strategy and to take it forward. If we take up regenerative agriculture as an elements which are part has been defined, or the components which are forming the regenerative agriculture, it is all minimum tillage, residue on the soil, crop diversity, maintain living roots year round, and integrate livestock. What is new in this? This has been the practice of Indian agriculture. If we talk, I am born and brought up in a village, and fortunately I have touched soil, I have worked soil, and in today's generation most of the people have not even touched the soil. So that is what nothing new in these 5 elements which we are putting on the presentation. It is all had been being done by the Indian farmers, and the Indian agriculture was known for that. Krishi comes from the Karshan. Karshan is tillage. And tillage, we are saying no. How we will harvest potato if the soil is not to be disturbed? How we will harvest beetroot if the soil need not to be disturbed? We'll have to do all these things. We should not take it verbatim. We should not go into the extremes. We will have to disturb the soil also a little bit. We will have to do all those things which are required to be done in harmony with the nature. We should not do anything in extreme. That is what my point of view on this aspect. So we should not compete, and we cannot compete. Falsely, we can think that we can compete, but we cannot compete. And the nature will teach you the lesson one day that no, you should do, name it regenerative agriculture or whatever agriculture, you will have, we have to do that way. So nature is going to teach, we will have to be a part of and in harmony with the nature only. And that is not our choice. This is designed also for the human being. Coming to the crop residues, it is huge, as I said, and the major contributors are Indo-Gangetic Plains state, which are producing rice and wheat. And they are doing one thing which is anti-nature, is stubble burning. So that is definitely needs to be taken care of. And how we will do, it is a matter of, a lot of things needs to be done around, because why he is burning also needs to be understood. Because one of the studies, one of the article, some 4 or 5 years back, Down to Earth magazine had published, and it said that while you are doing all these things, transporting, converting into compost or any other matter out of the residues, it costs. But it costs only 1 rupee to burn it. It costs 1,000 rupees to do all those things. So farmer prefers to do that because he doesn't have the money, he doesn't have the patience. And he is having a very narrow window for that. But all said and done, if we can create something, I think I like the idea what it came from the Samunnati, that we should give this kind of support to the FPOs to do that. And I am witness, I have done in a World Bank's project where when I gave this opportunity to a self-help group to conduct the agri-input management way back in 1996, they did it very meticulously. They did the composting, vermicomposting and all those things. And it is well proven. And it was a women's self-help group that did it very nicely. And not 1 or 2, we had created some 300, 400 self-help groups where most of them were doing one or the other activities. So FPO's concept, if we connect these residue composting and management and reselling, recycling, I think that will be the one decentralized idea, which the other organization, the other day, yesterday, it was talked by Nandan that it is centralized. They bring the residues and do it and give it back to the farmers. I think this is the better option, that if we engage with the FPOs and give them, this is an additional income for them. And it is going to be the same catchment. It is going to get recycled into that without much cost and much effort. And if you look at it, these residues are precious. These are not the waste. That is, it is containing 40% carbon. It is having some nitrogen also, phosphorus also, and potash also, and a lot of sulfur also. So it is a nutrition. And it is 101 million tons. Again, old data. Today, if you are producing 300 plus million tons of food grains, I think you can go by half of that is the residue. You can roughly you can convert to. So over 150 million tons would be the residues, only from the rice and wheat kind of thing. So if we convert them, we can revert a lot of carbon back into the soil, plus nitrogen, phosphorus, potash. And we can compensate whatever is the additional required through the minerals. A conservation agriculture, I'm taking that it should be the part of, or it should be, I'm not going into regenerative definition again. So this is one way that we can recycle the residues on that. This is one practice which Dr. Jat has already done a lot of work. I have seen his field also, and a lot of work was done in the Indo-Gangetic Plain, Punjab and neighboring states. So this could be one area where we need to have it properly done. But definitely the mechanization and the heavy machines which are required are sometimes a barrier to this. And that's why its adoption is not taking place. There are many other reasons also for not getting its scaling up. But I think this needs to be taken up very seriously, and this could be one answer for the residue management. This is, I have already told that it is being burnt and that should be stopped. And that is what the report I was talking, that Down to Earth was talking, that some 2017, that it takes some 3,500 to 4,000 per hectare kind of cost, which can be addressed with one matchbox. So that is what they do. So we will have to give the answer for this kind of situations. We'll have to prepare ourselves in terms of technology and in terms of tools given to the farmers. We have now, I have taken an excerpt from the Dr. Lal's one very detailed paper. And I just want to point out just one point of this third point. You can just refer to that the loss of soil organic carbon can be resolved with appropriate soil crop management. Intensive agriculture with use of chemical fertilizers during 1981-82 to 2005-06 improved soil organic concentration by 38%. And this is one finding, and there are several findings on that when you are using in a proper judicious way and you are growing crops, you are keeping the roots, the biomass inside the soil, you are getting it recycled, it is going to add to the whole system. So this is the finding. This is the thought for the people who will be drafting the policy or the points for this conference to be taken further. I think this needs to be considered. And I believe that the integrated nutrient management is all well proven. Volumes have been generated in terms of articles and experiments by the ICR system. Not only India, but across the world, there has been a lot been talked about the integrated nutrient management, and that needs to be practiced. We have done some examples like potash. Molasses can be a source for the potash that can be derived. Now the government of India has promoted this also. Now it is going to be a part of fertilizer industry's protocol. Another is the phosphate-rich organic manures that can also be a part of it. So rock phosphate mixed with the organic manures could be the best source for that. And we have growth into that. Some 70,000 plus this kind of products are getting consumed across the states. So biochar is another which can be converted right from the residue to a carbon source. A very decentralized process ICRISAT has worked out. I think we can collaborate and we can work on that. And then we as an organization, we have done it. That just I will take one extra minute. That the soil test is being talked. In the morning, Dr. Swain was talking about the soil test machine. I think that is one tool that can help a lot to generate sensitivity about regenerative, organic, or natural farming, whatever term we use for that. Because the farmer needs to understand the soil health. What are the parameters in a very simple manner? We have 9 crore plus, I think in the 2 cycles, soil health cards have been done. One that it should not be, I'm talking from a forum, but sorry for that, but it is not a real soil health card. It is missing the biological health aspect of the soil. So it cannot be called the soil health card. It is simply the chemical description of the soil, except organic carbon. It is talking nothing. So we are going to incorporate from this year onwards that one component that we will be giving farmers the biological indicators also to the farmers. That is one. Secondly, that we have adopted across. We have a very good system which has been provided by the ICR system again, that the soil test crop response based recommendations that we have incorporated the equations, whatever the crops have been developed with the equations, we have taken them and we are providing the reports based on the STCR concept only. So this is all being done to promote this kind of sensitivity, that you will have to go for the integrated nutrient management. Organic carbon is already low. Everybody knows this is our own soil test data, which we use as a tool to sensitize farmers. We go and explain them that your report card is showing this, your organic carbon is less, so what you have to do. So explanation is very important. Only three important points I wanted to highlight here: that research interventions on regenerative agriculture for smallholders and site-specific agri-production systems needs to be worked out through the researches. Maybe it could be the unit of 127 our agroclimatic regions, or even FPO-wise, watershed-wise, whatever unit we can identify, that can be worked out. Bridging the gap between indigenous agri-practices, ITKs, and agronomic best practices. And then the conservation agriculture practices should be customized to the area-specific situations. And we had one NP-MCR national policy for the residue management way back in 2014, needs to be revisited. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Actually, you have exceeded your time, Dr. Singh, but you may thank Madam Bhanu for it, because she had given us a few minutes. So what she has given, you have taken, and
So
this is
a carbon credit.
this is the carbon credit. Exactly. Exactly. So we will just change the format. We have some 20 minutes with us, and we will open this forum to you all for asking questions. And then we will quickly take about 5-7 minutes time to summarize what we think is important and the carry home points. Is that okay? Any questions? We can start off right now. Yeah, okay, Victor.
Please target the question to the concerned speaker also, whom you want to respond.
Yeah, well, it's not really a question, but something that is food for thought for all of us. So I see that while we are still struggling also with the definition in terms of the technical side of regenerative agriculture, I see from the presentations of this last session that there's also a lot of work that we need to do on the consumer side. In the first presentation, I think that he was talking about what is it, the value for the consumer. Yeah, and talks about transparency and all that. But he says that ecological concerns are secondary to the consumer. So that is, of course, also of much of concern, because that is what I assume is in regenerative agriculture. Yeah, so if the ecological concerns are of secondary, but after I know that we all know that safety is also a major important distance. Ecological may be secondary, but the safety may be a major issue for consumers. Now, Madam Lithari was talking about, and I like that presentation very much, about products, consumers buying products. Yeah, and I know where she's coming from, but just for the diversity of the people here, I think that ideally, consumers will buy a solution to a problem. So even though if there's a product, yeah, the underlying this thing is that it is solving a problem. Yeah, and that's the only reason why consumers will want to buy. So with that and all these discussions, I think that whilst we looking into the technical aspects, of what regenerative agriculture is, the question is how will we market that to the consumer? Yeah, is it about the ecological concerns? Is it about the safety of the product? How is that going to do? I know there's a lot of things they talk about Ayurvedic. Yeah, I think that has health benefits. But how are we going to be able to market regenerative agriculture? That's something that we need to think about. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. It's about how we do it And it's about who takes the first step to do it. And the third is about who provides the platform so that it can be done. Is it the civil society? Is it the government? Is it all of us pushing someone to do it? So these are all very important questions we have on in our mind. I think you wanted a question. Just hold on. There's one person. Sir, आपके लिए थोड़ा सा. Yeah.
Very, very interesting session. Compliments to all the speakers. Very interesting thing is that I still came to know that there is not still so much of a pull by the consumers as to why do I pay a premium when it comes to a naturally produced or regenerative agriculture product. In other words, but in this case, I'm really concerned about. Are we really, putting the horse behind the cart, and if that is so, then how do we generate this kind of a thing? I mean, the required awareness. Part one, and the next question is to Miss Likita. She spoke a lot about her business and other things, but since she's dealing with green vegetables, I guess you deal with green vegetables. Yeah. Okay. So, okay. But what measures do you take in really ensuring that this is organically grown, particularly those, I would rather say that green leafy vegetables. I'm only interested in this.
Thank you. I'll request Mr. Rajshekhar Reddy to take the first question. And if you can, Madam, take the next one.
I think we'll have to split it into two parts. One is what is in it for the farmer and what is in it for the consumer. So I think we have been doing this organic farming for the last 18 years. So I think when we go to the farmer, we don't say that you're going to become rich because of this. So our basic thing is, one, your life is going to be better because one, you'll save a little bit on costs. Second is the financial risk reduces because you don't have to borrow money for fertilizer, pesticide, which is one of the major reasons for a lot of financial stress and then suicides, etc. at the farm level. And third, what we have found empirically is when people start practicing organic, regenerative, whatever you call, the soil becomes better. And to that extent, the production risk comes down. And what we have seen is particularly either during drought or too much heavy rains, these fields withstand and perform much better than conventional. And we were also always wondering why would farmers want to do, because one is there's a negative incentive because they don't get that subsidized fertilizer, nothing they get. So I think these are the three reasons why farmers today also, I'll be frank, we are not procuring 100% from our farmers, not because we don't want to, but the market is still evolving. Hopefully that will happen in the next 1-2 years. So these are the reasons why farmers continue to practice organic farming. One is little lower cost. Second is financial risk is down. And third is the soils are better, the production risk is down. And fourth, perhaps over a period of time, farmers realize that let's say sickness in the family is less because they're not exposed to all those toxic chemicals, etc.
Consumer.
Yeah. And obviously, then we also say that whenever we have premium, you think it's a bonus. But you should do this not because we are going to pay a premium, but because there's a benefit to that. And obviously, not every farmer understands or realizes or appreciates this, but there are enough farmers who appreciate and realize this. So I think that is the one level. And when it comes to consumers, today I think, let's say I think today I think we talk about our farmer story, etc. We are impacting so many lives, etc. So it's a nice thing. People do appreciate. But will they pay a premium for that? That's very doubtful, very unlikely. So I think that's where I think the story, I think Victor talked about food safety. So in this case, about pesticide residues, right? And second, we ourselves have started a project called Amrit Mitti, where out of our 35,000 farmers, we have selected 3,500 farmers. And we have started testing the soil. We started with that. And then what we are going to do is test the soil, then look at the soil microbiome, then also the yields. And then fourth is the nutritional quality. So the hypothesis is may not be in the major nutrients, but in terms of the micronutrients, the nutritional profile will be much better from whatever little published data is available. So we are going to do this a multi-year study. Hopefully that will also strengthen our claim. One is about, let's say, safety from a no contamination kind of point of view. And second is in terms of better nutrition, whatever.
Yeah, health
So
and
this-
wellness. I think that's getting built into that marketing communication. So, ma'am, about that question, how many farmers, if you can add, are you
So
working
that's
with?
a very easy question actually, because we grow our leafy vegetables ourselves. So a bit about our introduction is we're actually farmers first. So my mother's been into organic farming for over 30 years now, and we grow close to 28 varieties of fruits and vegetables in our family lands. So that's what we sell. Not fruits and vegetables, because that's a very difficult thing to do, organic farming of fruits and vegetables, and most amount of pesticide and fertilizer is used in FNV. So cereals are still better, but this is hard. And so we do have a controlled environment that we do agriculture in.
Perfect. Please.
Sir, okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. And this session was very interesting. All the four presenters, they have given a very good and practical tips. Now, with regard to Sir Sri Raj Seelam, sir, so you talked about you are procuring a lot of material and exporting to various countries. I was also working in private earlier stage. I was in capsicum seed production company, and farmers also cheat.
So please, your question, please.
Yeah,
Please
I'm-
come to your question.
Come-
Be very precise, to the point, succinct.
Yes, farmers do cheat. So do you also face such type of problem? How do you identify what kind of monitoring system you have? How do you brand them or blacklisting? Every year, how many percentage of farmers you are blacklisting? Second thing is, I heard that even exporting, organic farming continuously you are spraying the neem oil. Even neem oil also having a residual effect like azadirachtin. So some lots have been rejected. Do you face any such problem?
So I think basically what we have evolved over a period of time is a 5-level kind of a check system. One is we form farmers into informal groups, and we tell the group that if anyone violates, we expect the group to inform. If they don't inform, we find out, then obviously the whole group gets penalized. So that's a little bit social pressure. Second is, I think we have about one person for every 300 farmers or so. So their job is to visit the fields every day. So typically every farm gets visited based on the, let's say, the radius in which the project is located, anywhere between 2 to 4 times in a month. So that's the second check. And third is what we do is we do internal inspections every season. Like someone working in, let's say, Andhra will go to Telangana to inspect each and every farm every season to make sure, one, the farmer is doing organic, and second, there's no contamination risk from neighboring fields, because everyone may not be doing organic. And the fourth is, of course, the certification agencies. They do their checks every season, but that is a sample 10, 20% based on the risk assessment. And fifth, we test for pesticide residues. So typically we define a batch size based on the risk. If it is a chili or a spice, it is 5 tons, 10 tons, lot size. If it is, let's say, paddy, it'll be a few hundred tons. So this is the kind of thing we evolved. And then generally, I think we don't find, we are not found too many issues, in sense we are able to control things. And our dropout rate, I would say dropout rate would have been about 4-5% in the last 17, 18 years. But here also the one is, of course, the monitoring, etc. But more importantly, one is the important thing is you have to pick and choose your battles. If I go to a Punjab or East Godavari Delta, it will be very difficult for me to do this. So what we have found is, one is Rain-fed areas, definitely it's easier to do this because there a lot of times lane is the limiting factor more than anything else. Second is lower input areas. I wouldn't say low input areas. And we don't really work in any tribal areas now, but these are regular fields. But because of various circumstances, they don't want to use too much inputs. And third is what we have found is farmers' attitude becomes very important. Because if the attitude is to get rich quickly, there's nothing much we can do. So what we have found is in some areas, regions, people have a more sattvic attitude. So I think these are the filters we use. One is in terms of selection of the areas. Second, once we select, then in terms of the monitoring. So now we have our people have apps with smartphones, etc. So every farm is geotagged, and when they go there, every time they have to send a picture and then give a report. And in real time, we are able to monitor when our person has visited and then all that. And then whenever the non-compliance, whatever we have found, I'm not saying that we have found zero in testing. We find some residues, very low level. But then when we investigate, a lot of times it could be spray drift from neighboring fields, etc. In which cases we try to convince the neighboring farmer. And in some cases we are not able to control, we may have to drop the farmer. So
Thank you. Thank you. Ma'am.
My question also to Mr. Rajshekhar, and as a consumer, since you focused on the consumer in your presentation, though I'm from Nandi Foundation, which is also working with farmers and regenerative agriculture, but I happen to be a consumer of 24-letter mantra, your dal, atta, chawal for many years. So on the informing the consumer, what's in it for the consumer in that context about labeling of packaging, I have read about in other countries how whether the label describing what is there or this sort of certifying the safety, whether it's in the front of the package or back of the package also is a major policy sort of move. And I think Mexico or somewhere for baby food, especially now, it's an important victory that packaging, the labeling is in front. So in that context, I'm talking about packaging we have in our country and the labeling. I can speak from my personal experience. I don't know if anybody else shares that. You're informed. I mean, I work with Nandi Foundation. Obviously, I'm informed and I want to know what the label says, but the font size is like, 4.5. There is no way you can read. And if you're in a hurry, you're not going to read it at all. So, I mean, it's funny, but I have a feeling there's a politics behind this also. The less your consumer knows about what you are selling,
it can be politics. It can be also a political ignorance. So whichever way we take it. Sir, please, your question.
Yeah.
Last.
So excellent presentation, but again, I will start Mr. Rajshekhar Reddy, because my question is broader question. So you work with the farmers, consumers, and everybody. So until now, most of the focus of the presentations, especially the three, is for the niche products and niche markets. But here, my understanding, the policy intention is entirely different. Here, the government and the policy want to make a paradigm shift in the whole agriculture system, not creating a particular niche product or niche market. But the intention is, in general, farmers try to adopt practices as far as possible to minimize these pesticides and organic or regenerative direction, but without compromising much the productivity. So what is your take on this or your thinking on this? What should be the strategy? What could be possible? Something, and others can also contribute.
Can you just hold on for 1 second? Sir, is your question to him?
My question is to all.
Okay. So,
I don't raise question.
okay, good.
I'll tell them my experience.
So, perfect. So we will go back to him, take the answer, and then we'll take your.
Just clarify to Madam's point. Yes, I think that's an issue, like what you said. So I think what we have done in our case is we have just launched a farm to fork traceability system. We have a QR code on the front of the pack. You scan the QR code, then you go to a website, just key in the batch number, and then you can find which farmers have grown, where they have grown, when they have grown, how they have grown, and also testing reports, etc., related to that lot number, if not the batch number. Lot number is a larger compromising of multiple batches. So that is there. And of course, FSSAI is talking about putting the nutrition, not nutrition, but certain important things like calories and then the fat, etc., on the front of the pack. But there again, I think they've talked about a star rating system, which is not a right thing. Because in India, if you put two stars, also people think it's great because of whatever. Even if you look at our ACs, 2-star versus 0-star. So obviously there's a lot of debate on that. Looks like it's going to take some time. But I think this is what we have done as a voluntary effort from our side. Then I think second, what you're saying is absolutely correct. Because I think these things don't have to be niche markets. So two things. One is obviously as the scale improves, the price premiums will definitely come down. Even now also you have organic products which are ranging from 20% to 70-80% premium, but that can over a period of time come down with economies of scale. Second is it doesn't, and always when we talk about, we are talking about urban market kind of context, but it doesn't have to be like that. Because the ideal situation is locally produced, locally consumed to the extent possible. Because obviously when we consume a plate, everything cannot get produced locally. But at least let's say you have your dal and then if you are able to sell locally, whether it is through FPOs or some other system, like I think morning Vijay Kumar talked, and then he was also talking to set up small shops which can source locally and then sell locally. Obviously that's a solution. And a lot of those costs get eliminated and then the price will be much cheaper. But having said that, I think if you're going to use this without like some of this stuff, particularly I think in storage, you use a lot of chemicals, as much chemicals as in the field actually, because every 15 days you fumigate. So if you have to eliminate all that, then the costs go up. So I think the consumer should be willing to pay 10-15% more, which I think shouldn't be an issue. In fact, a lot of times when we opened our first store in Banjara Hills, we thought the rich people will buy. And that's why we opened in a richer area. But then we found that it is not so much about how much money you have, but your mindset. So there used to be people coming on some old, almost broken down scooter from 20-25 kilometers, buying and going and then encouraging us, saying that don't close down. And a person would come in a Mercedes and say, why this is 1 rupee more. So having that, we have today customers, every time people ask us, what is your customer segmentation? What is the profile? We say we have no profile because there's an auto driver, there's a barber, there is also a taxi driver who buys, may not be all products, 1 or 2 products for various reasons. So I think it's also a mindset issue.
Thank you. That was well taken. Sir, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rashekar. You made a point in your presentation that you don't buy directly from the farmers.
We buy directly.
But you made a point that you don't buy, you have, you want everything.
No, not we. I said typically manufacturers, then look at the larger.
You buy directly, then my point is redundant.
So we buy, but otherwise most
No,
companies.
actually, anyway, let me talk.
Fraction of the whole thing. So on that angle, I said.
So actually, I was in Sri Lanka. I was working there as agribusiness managers of Cargill's PLC. And we set up a fresh produce business to buy directly from the farmers. We developed a system which we called contact system, not the contract system. It was not, there is no contract at all. It was formal, informal understanding. And we started with buying directly. The farmers were getting 10% saving because they have to spend 10% otherwise. They were getting upfront money, so they were very happy. So then slowly actually we built them up, that we gave them the seed, we gave them the training, we gave them the kind of inputs, the toolkits we prepared. And with that, actually, the whole business became so viable. And as far as the logistics is concerned, we have collection centers. And collection centers, truck will move from one collection center and cover the entire range from one direction, other will move from other side, the other direction. So this was a kind of, so no farmer ever left us. And during my stay of 3 years, when we have started this program. And the farmers actually gained a lot of credit from the banks. Directly, they could get money by showing the receipt they have got from Cargill's. So that's the kind of incentive if we give that farmers, all the elements are put together. Yeah. What I'm trying to say is, and fortunately in Sri Lanka, for fruits and fresh produce, the use of pesticides is very limited, very, very limited. Only fertilizers are used. At that point in time, I was 6-7 years back. What I'm talking. And so the fertilizers, I can tell you that they don't cause any harm to the produce, they cause harm to the environment if used badly. So this is the kind of thing I suppose maybe it's not really contracting, but contacting. The keyword was contacting. And that developed actually confidence, and we worked very well.
Thank you. That was very insightful. I think we have come to the end of this session. Any questions? You have? Oh my God. This is the last question, okay? Because we are already eating into the. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. My question was also again to Rajshekhar ji. You did mention that currently there is about 2 million consumer base vis-a-vis your 25 million addressable market. So I was wondering what is limiting that? I mean, I was assuming that the gap between, I mean, that 25 is itself identified based on purchasing capacity probably. So is it the awareness? Is it accessibility? What is limiting to bridge that gap?
I think one is still the awareness, because as I said, even after so many years, when you say natural, pure or desi, everything gets equated, everything is organic kind of thing. So I think that definition is still there. And then second is, yeah. Then second is obviously still, I think a lot of people saying that, how do I trust? So that's why we have come out with this traceability system, so that everything is the data, everything is given to the consumer, so that the transparency is there. Then third issue is also a little bit of a mental block, right? So when a woman, a lot of times, I think most of the time, whether we like it or not, women do the grocery shopping. Because I used to, when we first opened the store, I used to be a lot in the store. The men would come and put a lot of things in the basket. And when it comes to billing, the woman would take out most of the things. So I think it's not about money. People have the money, but I think we have found even in our focus research, a lot of women work with a ration budget. This is the budget for my grocery. And then even though they might have a lot of money, that's a different thing, but it's a mental block. So I guess it's time and some behavioral change, some education, all this hopefully will help this. And what we have found worldwide also is these kind of markets, whether you call organic, natural, whatever. So every time there's been a food scare, health scare, etc., people become more conscious, and then the adoption rates have increased every time that has happened.
Thank
And
you.
that's what we have seen during COVID.
Thank you. I think if you have something more to ask, you can of course connect. Yeah, sure, please. That's what we are for. Connect, interact, question, learn more. So I'll request Selvaraj to give a final closing remarks.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to thank all the speakers who have taken time to come over here in person and make the presentation directly. And this has been an insightful session from the market perspective. In fact, a lot of waste management related things were also talked by Dr. Kk Singh, which was also like assuring us that what we are doing as a regenerative agriculture is nothing new. We have been doing in the past and we need to continue it. Only thing, the approach has to change, how we look at it. And from the market perspective, we had good interactions, even from the participants also. They shared their views, how they are looking at this as a market opportunity for the farmers. So holistically, we see that this has been an insightful session for all of us. And we thank even all the participants for giving us the time, enough time to share our views. And I would like to also thank our chair for steering the session, and also the rapporteurs, Dr. Saikat, Datta Majumdar, and Ms. Divya Nancy for taking the notes. So this will be shared with the organizers as we go along. So thank you all, and thank you for the session. Back to you, Victor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Prasan Saka and Aravaz Selvaraj for that and for a very interesting session. So we just have a short break. But since we are talking about regenerative agriculture, if you want to regenerate some energy, there's still some coffee and tea. But please ensure you are back here exactly by 5 o'clock so that we can have the special address. Thank you very much. national food security and policy needs. Now, this is going to be delivered by Dr. Prabhu Pingali, Professor, Cornell University, and is going to be chaired by Dr. Pravin Rao, former VC, PJT SAU. So, Dr. Pravin Rao, over to you then. Thank you.
Good morning, Professor Pingali.
Good morning.
Yeah, good evening, all the participants. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Shall I go ahead? Am I audible, please?
Yes, yes, go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. Yes. So, in fact, yesterday, Professor Pingali was with us, and we had a wonderful presentation by Professor Ratan Lal, which was chaired by our Professor Pingali. And today we have another lecture by him on regenerative agriculture, implications to national food security and policy needs. Am I right, Pingali? Is there any change in the title?
There's a change, but I will mention that when I talk.
Okay, right. So I'll be privileged to introduce him. Dr. Prabhu Pingali is the founding director of Tata Cornell Institute for Agriculture and Nutrition and a professor in the Charles H. Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management, with joint appointments in the Division of Nutritional Sciences and in the Department of Global Development in the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences at Cornell, Ithaca. Prior to moving to Ithaca in June 2013, he was Deputy Director of the Agriculture Department Division of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation from 2008 to May 2013. He has several distinctions. To quote a few, Dr. Pingali was elected as the US National Academy of Sciences as a foreign fellow. He was also the president of International Association of Agriculture Economists. He was also elected fellow of the American Agricultural Economics Association and of the International Association of Agricultural Economists. And Dr. Pingali, prior to joining Cornell, he was the Deputy Director of the Agriculture Development Division of the what called Bill and Melinda Gates. He was the Director of the UN Food and Agriculture Organization as well, of Agriculture and Development Economics Division from 2002 to 2007. In addition to the above, he worked for several years in CJIR institutions, to name a few, at IRRI in the Philippines, and he was with CIMAT as well in Mexico. Pingali was also a member in the US National Academy of Sciences and American Agricultural Economics Association. He has over 3 decades of experience working with some of the leading international organizations, particularly related to agriculture, as a research economist, development practitioner, and a senior manager. He has written 13 books. I had an opportunity to read a few of them, the recent one on nutrition pertaining to India, and over 120 refereed journal articles and book chapters on food policy. He is currently the board chair of governing board of ICRISAT. Dr. Pingali, if you remember, when you were here during the COVID last second phase of the COVID, you were here for a board meeting, and we had a discussion on that during at DG's home for a dinner. We were together. I think you remember it. And so what to call insightful discussions in several sessions. And today also some of the private practitioners from notably 24 Mantra, which is on the shelves of US as well in several malls. Mr. Rajshekhar Reddy is also there. NV Ramna advisor from Samunnati was here, and from Terra Greens Organic, Kk Singh from Juari was there. We had fruitful discussions, and I think your presentation will add to this and give a lot of insights into it, how regenerative agriculture can address the nutritional problems of India. Probably in one of your recent presentations, we have shown wonderful maps of nutritional problems in India as well. I had an opportunity to see them as well. Now the floor is yours, Dr. Pingali.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Praveen Rao. It's good to see you again, and thank you for this very generous introduction. Good evening to all of you. It's a pleasure to be back at this conference again, and I hope you had great discussions over the last 2 days. I look forward to hearing more about that. Let me share my screen. There.
Yeah, it is visible.
Okay, I'm going to go to slide share mode. All right. So I've changed my topic slightly, but it's still on the same subject matter. And it's now the role of regenerative agriculture in tackling climate change and hunger, policies, opportunities, and challenges. And let me start by echoing what Professor Lal said yesterday. When we think about regenerative agriculture, we are talking about a diversity of practices that are smarter, that improve overall resilience and sustainability of the agriculture system and agriculture landscapes. We're not talking about any one particular way of doing things, but rather promoting an entire range of smart techniques, of smart farming, of more judicious farming. And so that's, I think, a fundamental message that I'd like to give you. When we talk about regeneration and regenerative agriculture, we usually think about agriculture by itself. But actually, today, the issue of regeneration is being discussed very broadly. It's being discussed across all sectors: energy, water, urbanization, urban cities, transport, etc., in addition to food production. And one of the books that I recently read on regeneration has been an enormously helpful book for me to understand this whole area of regeneration. It's a book written by Paul Hawkins. You can see that here. I have the picture of the cover. It's called Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation. And Paul Hawkins is a very distinguished ecologist and author. And this book came out through Penguin Press in 2021. And to quote a line from it, regeneration means putting life at the center of every action and decision. It applies equally to agriculture, forests, oceans, cities, schools, commerce, etc. And so we're now looking at regeneration across sectors, across the world. And I think one of the big challenges we have is how do you create synergies across all of these different sectors, across all of these different approaches that are being taken. So all of us are familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. I think in 2015, when the Sustainable Development Goals were set out, the word regeneration hadn't yet become a household name, a household word. But sustainability certainly was. And many of the principles that were in the Sustainable Development Goals are very relevant today as you think about regeneration and regenerative systems. And I think one of the issues that was really missed out as the Sustainable Development Goals were being set up is that as you try to improve one system, as you try to pursue one goal, you'll be affecting progress on all other goals. So as you try to progress on the poverty reduction goal, you may be enhancing the prospects for improving the hunger goal, or you may be creating additional barriers to achieving the hunger goal. So one has to look at what the synergies are between the goals and what the trade-offs are between the goals. And I think that's a really important point as we think about regeneration and as we think about regeneration across the societal objectives that we have set for ourselves. So let me zero in on just two of them. Let me zero in on the hunger goal, which is the zero hunger goal, and the climate goal, the climate action goal, goal number 2 and goal number 13. Now, India is very much bought into the Sustainable Development Goals, and India is certainly very much focused on the zero hunger goal. India is very focused on doubling productivity and improving overall efficiency of production systems, etc., as part of the quest towards getting to zero hunger. But the way one approaches zero hunger without looking at the trade-offs relative to greenhouse gas emissions, relative to the ability to capture carbon, etc., could result in negative impacts on our ability to achieve the climate action goals, on our ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, etc. So, but at the same time, if you can look at much more smarter production systems, then one can reduce those trade-offs and one can enhance the synergy between the goal towards hunger reduction and the goal towards climate action. So if you just took the goal of hunger as one of increasing production in a business as usual scenario with increased inputs, etc., then definitely we'll see an increase in overall greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture, and we'd see increasing land degradation. At the same time, if you just took the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture without considering the food security consequences, then you may be adopting practices or promoting practices that actually increase the number of hungry people. And that's the quandary that we've been put in trying to trade off one versus the other. But the entire regenerative agriculture principles provide a new pathway, a pathway to look at reducing hunger and reducing greenhouse emissions simultaneously. And I think that's a really important way in which we should think about it. Here is a new pathway which can help us increase synergies across these goals. But it can also increase synergies across some of the other goals around water and sanitation, etc. But right now, I want to focus on just these two. So what are some of the principles that I think of when we say regenerative agriculture? When in my view, we're talking about conservation and rehabilitation of agricultural lands. And the focus essentially is on soil health. Soil health being a major part of the rehabilitation process, improving soil health in order to improve long-term sustainability of the agricultural system. But in addition to that, one sees the regeneration resulting in increasing biodiversity, improving the water cycle, supporting carbon sequestration, and increasing climate resilience. I think these are all principles of regenerative agriculture, and I'm sure you've talked about them quite extensively over the last 2 days. Now, if you think about how do you apply this to a common approach to zero hunger and net zero carbon, then I think the strategy that we would want to be looking at is a strategy which looks at how do you improve the existing system, the existing cropping system, and how do you change the system? So these are two distinct ways one could think about it. And they're not either or. One can have both of them happening. So within an existing cropping system, let's say the rice wheat system, which is the big predominant cropping system in the Indo-Gangetic plains, then there are 4 distinct ways in which one can apply regenerative principles. One is to reduce the yield gap. By reducing the yield gap, you're actually reducing the amount of emissions per unit of output, but you're also releasing, excuse me, you're also releasing land out of agriculture. Land can then be used in agroforestry system, forest systems, tree crop plantations, etc., which then also helps in additional carbon sequestration. The second way to think about it is increasing nutrient use efficiency. And nutrient use efficiency also results in improved productivity, but also reduced emissions, reduced nitrous oxide emissions, etc., on a unit basis. And reduced and zero tillage systems. I'm sure those have been discussed extensively in the meeting. But what reduced and zero tillage systems do, in addition to improving soil health, in addition to carbon sequestration, is they also lead to reduced energy use. And that interface between tillage and energy is something that regenerative systems can really help reduce that energy dependence in agriculture systems. And finally, improved water use efficiency. And water use efficiency comes through all of the above practices that are happening: improved soil health, improved nutrient efficiency, etc., improved tillage systems, etc. And one of the advantages that come out of improved water use efficiency is also the interface with energy. As water use efficiency increases, the amount of energy used for pumping water, etc., begins to fall. So these are some of the broad systems changes that need to take place within existing systems. But one can also look at changing systems. As we all know, rice is a major emitter of greenhouse gases, and looking at areas where one can transition from rice systems to alternate systems is another way to think about regeneration and the interface between regenerative agriculture and climate change. And that's something I'll come back and talk about. But what's our baseline? The baseline today is that we're looking at India and we're looking at South Asia as being the global center for highly degraded soils. Highly degraded soils in the most productive regions, such as the Indo-Gangetic plains, but also in the semi-arid areas, the dryland areas, etc. Soils that are degraded due to erosion, due to water-related degradation, due to chemical imbalances, soil fertility declines, etc. And one needs to say, how do we create a rehabilitation of these systems? How do you create a rehabilitation of the soils and degraded lands? And what's the role that we see of regenerative agriculture in this process? And as we discussed earlier, much of the practices that we're talking about in terms of land management, water and nutrient management, and crop diversification, all of them play a major role as we look at opportunities for regeneration, and which would then lead to improved productivity, but it would also lead to significant control and management and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and more resilience of these systems to extreme climate events, etc. And at the center of all this is soil health. I think soil health plays a major role in regenerative agriculture, and the way farmers practice agriculture has a big role to play in ensuring soil health or in worsening soil health. And the current business as usual scenario of high tillage, high input use, etc., definitely has significant long-term negative effects on soil health, and opportunities for reducing tillage, incorporating residues, being more judicious in input use, etc., can contribute significantly to the positive long-term benefits, long-term health of soils. Many of the ICRSAT colleagues were in the room when Professor Harold Van Ness gave his talk on soil health last month. And Professor Van Ness actually talked about the Soil Health Index, which brings together a balanced approach to looking at soil health, which looks at the physical properties, the chemical, the biological processes involved in soils and soil health, and emphasizes the really important aspect that as you think about soil health, again, there's no one approach, that soil health is not exclusively dependent on fertilizers or exclusively dependent on organic manures, but looking at balanced approaches across a variety of nutrients, across a variety of nutrient supply sources is crucial as you look at soil health. And that's an area I think we need to be discussing some more. The other interesting work that's been done through Cornell University in India has been this work by Professor Andrew MacDonald, who's lived for more than a decade in Nepal and has worked very extensively in Bihar and in the Indo-Gangetic plains. And they've been using big data, they've been using satellite imagery, and to look at nitrous oxide emissions coming from farmers' fields across the region. And one of the most interesting results that come out of this work is that the extent of nitrous oxide emissions that come out are coming out on small farms and coming from farms which have very low yields. So you find that even small farmers are using high levels of chemical fertilizers. And much of that, because then the application processes are not adequate, the timing is not appropriate, etc., you find there's large amounts of losses that are happening. So the losses in nitrous oxide is much higher when you look at low productive systems than when you look at higher productive systems. And that's, I think, a really important lesson for us to look at, especially when we think about bridging the yield gap and how bridging the yield gap can actually have beneficial effects from an environment and a climate perspective. Seem to be. The next issue is what I mentioned earlier. It's the connection between agriculture and energy. I think as we think about regenerative agriculture, as we think about conservation agriculture, zero tillage, minimum tillage, etc., and increase water use efficiency, then we are contributing significantly to energy savings from use of tractors, use of other mechanical instruments in land preparation, tillage, etc., use of diesel and electric power for pumping water and for irrigation purposes, etc. So that connection between regenerative agriculture and energy use and the positive impacts for the energy sector, I think are crucial and a really solid way in which to promote policy change for regenerative agriculture. Related to this is the issue of renewable energy for irrigation systems. We were in Bihar last month working on a project which I'll tell you about in a minute. And we're starting to see solar pumps coming in for irrigation purposes. But the extent to which solar pumps are coming in is dwarfed by the rapid spread of electric pumps across the region. And that's not surprising, given that electricity is almost zero in price for farmers in the region. And so the incentive to make the switch is limited. But if the incentives are right, then the opportunities for looking more seriously at renewable energy becomes feasible. And I think that's a future we should be thinking about. Now, the next big way one can think about regeneration is to think about system change. And today we're actually in a very fortunate situation there's rising demand for fruits and vegetables and other high value products, especially from urban consumers, middle class consumers. There's rising demand for pulses. And looking at ways in which one can meet this rising demand creates an opportunity for transitioning from a more water intensive, climate intensive crops, staple grain crops in certain areas, and transitioning to a more diversified production system. And a more diversified production system that can be less water intensive, can be less intensive in terms of emissions of greenhouse gases, etc., and may require less amounts of energy use. I think that transition is something we need to be looking forward to. And as the demand for diversity of diets increases, that synergy between consumer diets and production system changes, and the consequences for environment and climate are really important. And it's an area we should be focused on as we look forward. I know as agriculturalists, we tend to be much more focused on the production side, but much of what's produced is in reaction to what's demanded from the consumers. And so that linkages between consumers and producers is absolutely crucial. Livestock is another area where there's a lot of work on regenerative agriculture. I recently was in a meeting in Delhi where there was a solid discussion on opportunities for regenerative livestock production systems. And thinking about livestock production systems within this context of zero hunger and net zero carbon emissions, one can see various opportunities for synergies. I think one of the lessons that came out of the workshop was that increasing animal productivity is really important. So increasing the milk productivity per cow or per buffalo is a really important way of thinking about regenerative agriculture, because then it results in reduction in the numbers of cows and buffaloes that are needed over the long term. You have fewer animals and smaller feed requirements, there's less loss and less greenhouse gas emissions as the overall herd sizes decline. A second area one can look at is in forage and feed management. Transitioning from straw as feed to looking at better quality forages, better quality feed, etc., that improve milk productivity. And that also then reduces the use of lower quality feeds such as straw, etc. And the third part of the livestock economy that has significant impacts on zero hunger, zero carbon is to look at the circular economy of waste and manure management. And I'll come to that in a minute. But a longer term perspective is to look at changes in livestock systems themselves, looking at ways in which you transition from not just having large animals, but to looking at poultry and smaller animals as a way to diversify the composition of livestock at the farm level. But that's a long-term change that again depends on consumer demand and the demand for maintaining different stocks on the field. But let me come to the issue of the circular economy. I was on the Nandi Foundation's urban farms in Delhi, and I was impressed with the way in which organic composting is being done at large scale. And organic composting using not just organic waste that comes from the farms themselves, but from all the surrounding areas. And then using this composting as a product that can be sold to farmers that are growing vegetables, growing other high value crops, etc. And I think opportunities such as this to look at ways in which one can create recycling and then create this circular economy around organic waste is crucial. And the technologies around waste management are also crucial, because quite often composting, if it's not done appropriately, can actually result in higher levels of greenhouse gas emissions. So appropriate composting technologies, appropriate practices in composting play a big role in managing greenhouse gases. The second picture shows you something all of us are familiar with, the biogas plant. The biogas plant has been one of these innovations that's been around for a while, for a long time. I remember when I was growing up, we had a biogas plant on our farm in South India. But then many of them kind of disappeared. And the reason they disappeared was LPG gas cylinders became so cheap and so accessible, and labor costs became so high. But there are new opportunities in biogas, and one needs to look at new technologies and new ways of coming back to biogas systems and bringing this back into the circular economy. That's an area I think a lot more work needs to be done than we have today. So we've been trying to address some of these principles of regenerative agriculture in work that my group has been doing in Bihar, where we've been looking at how do you create a roadmap for Bihar which reduces emissions without sacrificing on food productivity growth, the zero hunger, zero carbon principles. And from that, we've come to some issues that I'd like to talk about and some policy directions that I'd like to talk about. I think some of the issues that come out when we look at the systems is that does the size of the farm matter? Much of the experiences around farmers who pick up new innovations, pick up new practices, etc., you find that it's the larger farmers that tend to be more open to experiments, more open to putting part of their land in trying something new. Whereas smaller farmers don't have the luxury to be able to make that transition very fast or to experiment in parts of their fields. And creating opportunities for small farm involvement in changing these systems, in more rapidly adopting regenerative agriculture principles is absolutely crucial. I think the other issue that comes up is that as you make the transition, there could be a period when you are sacrificing yields or sacrificing productivity, even as you transition to a longer term, higher productivity pathway. And covering the loss during that transitional period is a big policy issue that needs to be addressed. You know, again, thinking about the consumer producer linkages, when we promote better production practices, but the price of the product does not change, then the incentives for farmers to adopt these practices is limited, especially if labor requirements are higher. So how do you transition to a situation where consumers are willing to pay a premium for better production practices? Like consumers pay a premium for organic vegetables. Is there a way to promote regenerative agriculture as a premium product for consumers, especially middle-class consumers? Zero-tillage systems, conservation agriculture systems, they certainly help farmers in reducing their overall costs, but they also reduce the demand for landless labor and labor requirements for tillage, etc., drop. So how do you compensate the losers in this process? And that's an area I think government policy needs to be thinking about. Government policy, as you think about regenerative agriculture, should be focused on many issues, that those structural issues I just talked about. But some of the policies that are in place need to be looked at very carefully. And I think the policies that I'd like to talk about today are the policy that made India self-sufficient in food, which was the focus on staple grains. The staple grain focus was really very important for us in addressing hunger. But as we look forward, we need to look at how do you transition to a broader food systems policy, to a broader policy of promoting a balanced food system. The second is repurposing input subsidies around fertilizer, electricity, etc. And then promoting more appropriate agriculture policy, agriculture practices that are location specific. Let me come to some of those issues. I think one of the fundamental issues for us as we think about diversification and as we think about a more balanced food systems is to redirect the current subsidies and the current support that's given exclusively for rice and wheat. And redirecting that support to creating a more balanced system. This is not easy to do. And the political economy of making this change is very high. But in the long term, if we want to think about a zero hunger, zero carbon system, one needs to look at a system that's much more balanced in different food groups than the current high focus on just the two big staple crops. The second area I think that needs support as you make this transition is new knowledge dissemination, new extension information, etc., for farmers to make the transition to a different production system. It also needs investments in roads, transport, market infrastructure, and institutional infrastructure, such as credit systems, etc. We should also be thinking about investments across the value chain. Much of what we see in terms of greenhouse gas emissions are emissions not just at the field level, but across the entire food value chain. And this is particularly true for perishable products when you are dealing with cold storage systems, temperature control transport systems, etc. And massive investments are required for managing this food value chain and making it more environmentally sustainable. And private sector investments in this area are absolutely crucial. And governments need to provide the opportunity for private sector investments to happen. And finally, behavior change among consumers is really important. One, in behavior change in terms of diets and diet change towards healthier diets, but also, as Professor Lal brought up yesterday, around food waste. And reducing food waste then has a direct impact on improving our overall food access, but also in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. When I think about repurposing subsidies, I'm thinking about transitioning from subsidies that are very focused on inputs, fertilizer, water, energy, etc., to looking at subsidies that can help make the transition, from the current practices to better practices. So in that transition period, subsidies can help in any income loss for farmers. Subsidies can help in access to better technologies, more precision agriculture technologies, zero tillage equipment, solar pumps, etc. And also the certification processes, which can then help create premium products for consumers. The certification of fruits, vegetables as being organically produced, produced in more sustainable way, etc. Then that separates the premium products from the other products, and one can justify a higher price for the premium products. One of the areas that there's been a lot of interest in is carbon credits, and carbon credits for conservation agriculture. And the data is still spotty on this, and I'm not quite sure to what extent small farms can gain from the carbon credit market, and what's the actual returns that small farms get from this process. I'm worried that the transactions costs associated with bringing small farms into the carbon credit market are very high. And much of the gains are captured by the intermediaries in the market rather than the farmers themselves. But this is an area that there's not enough work that's been done for me to have a rational judgment on. But I have a lot of questions about how carbon credits fit in within this broader area of regenerative agriculture and long-term sustainable production system. Let me make one final point. If you look at the map here, this is a map that was done by the Tata Cornell Institute, and you can find it in our report on food, agriculture, and nutrition in India, 2020. This map shows you the diversity of cropping systems in India. It shows you it's striking in terms of the enormous diversity that we have in our production systems. Given the diversity in the production systems, given the diversity of the agroecologies that we work in, and given the hundreds of millions of small farms that we have in India, I think it's important to say that there's no one-size-fits-all approach when we think about regenerative agriculture. I think there's room for a diversity of approaches, multiple approaches that fit different agroclimatic conditions, different farm sizes, cropping systems, different agriculture practices, etc. And I think there is a way in which one can think about regenerative agriculture as being a combination of organic farming, natural farming, regenerative farming, smart farming, agroecological approach, all types of approaches that are smarter, more judicious, more sustainable. They can all come together within our broader understanding of what we think is regenerative agriculture that promotes zero hunger and zero carbon. With that, let me say thank you. For those of you who are interested in the work that we do at the Tata Cornell Institute, everything we do is on our website. You can visit our website. You can follow us on various social media. With that, thank you very much, and I hand you back to the chair.
Thank you, Dr. Pingali. Wonderful presentation covering several aspects, starting with the concept broadly of the regenerative agriculture and touching upon I liked very much the statement of intersectoral synergies in relation to sustainable development goals. I think there is a great opportunity there to look at, and also emphasizing the renewable energy with regards to, and also precision nutrition work of TCI in Bihar. I think it's revealing small farmers using so much of fertilizer there, particularly in Bihar. Then system change, crop diversification work, as well as livestock work of TCI. Then the zero hunger, zero carbon food system. So several things have been touched, and with regards to how regenerative agriculture can bring broad changes in the opportunities in the existing systems as well. And also some practical field level issues like holding size, losses. This has been the losses issue whenever we introduce a new technology. Has been a challenging issue. Even now, the Ministry of Agriculture is talking about if whenever we upscale the agri-tech, new agri-tech emerging technologies, who will bear the losses? So this is always a challenging issue. And with regards to the premium prices, I think this is another issue related to accreditation of and certification of the products. Particularly, we are facing this challenge for organic, natural farming products as well. And the four major policy issues for consideration of the so what we call in India, that is the challenge of moving away from the cereal-centric issue of the staple crops towards balanced and healthy diets for crops, as well as subsidies towards regenerative agriculture, precision agriculture. Actually, precision agriculture, some subsidies are already, particularly precision irrigation, we have subsidies in terms of micro irrigation, and solar pumps as well we have. Another new concept, probably you might be aware of, agrophotovoltaics. That is another issue which people are looking at, wherein energy efficiency can be improved and as well as the crop efficiency can be improved. That, bringing them to the smaller and marginal holdings is a challenging issue what we have. That is another area I think we can. Then carbon credits. I think yesterday Barwale from Maharashtra made a case study wherein they are working at the field level with small and marginal farmers near in Punjab. I think that may throw some light of its feasibility at the field level. I think that is another area which probably farmers may benefit in the long run, but challenges are always there, and identifying the appropriate practices. I think the challenge would be converging and bundling all these regenerative agricultural strategies at one place and giving them giving the options for the farmers. I think that will be the greatest challenge during the upscaling. I think overall, wonderful presentation, sir. I particularly enjoyed the presentation. May I say Arvind or say Victor, can you? Arvind is there. Can you take some questions? Probably it may not be possible for me to do from here.
I'm here to help you, Chair.
Yeah.
Okay, questions for Dr. Prabhu. We go first here. Please introduce when you ask the question, then second here. Others can raise your hands. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Pengale, for the presentation. I'm Abhishek Jain from the Council on Water. I had one question and one reflection. The question was around the one slide that you presented on soil health index. That was quite interesting. But I was wondering that the graphs that were there on wheat yield and rice yield, were those across different geographies, like each data point on the graph, or were those temporal on the same geography? And if it is former, then are there plans to actually do sort of similar studies on a longitudinal scale, so to say, on the same geography? That was the question. The reflection I had was one of the points that you made with regards to zero till potentially leading to loss of farm labor opportunities, so to say. Whereas my understanding would be that given that most of the tillage is now happening through tractors, even in the small and marginal land holdings through rented tractors, actually it is not going to displace in any way opportunities for farm labor. If at all, it will probably increase the opportunities for farm labor because your weed issue is going to increase with zero tillage. And to remove the weed until we have other solutions which are mechanically feasible especially in mixed cropping, intercropping situations, you may need more manual labor to actually manage the weed. So I just had that reflection, and would be good to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I should have been clearer. I was thinking of zero tillage and direct seeding systems coming together. So when you have zero tillage and direct seeding, then you remove the need for transplanting labor. And that has a big impact on labor markets. And also, if you incorporate the straw, then significant amount of labor that's used for harvesting the straw, etc., is reduced also. So it's a variety of issues that come together, and of course it'll differ from cropping system to cropping system. I'm sorry, I forgot what was the first thing.
The soil health index one.
Right. The soil that data I think came from the same area, but looking at different soil conditions. So a variety of farms within one geography. So it was much more cross-sectional. But your point is taken that one needs to look at this long-term. And there are studies of that type that have been done in the US, etc., that have used long-term trials to look at changes in soil health over time and impacts on yield over time. I'm not an expert on that, but my colleague, Professor Harold Van Ness, is a global expert in this area. And he's been doing a lot of work on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Prabhu, for the nice presentation. I am Dilip Kumar Swen, Professor Agronomy, IIT Kharagpur. My question is very generic one. Suppose now if you go back now 50 years before, even if your childhood, the taste of food we had that time, that has been reversely deteriorated with the revolution of agriculture or modern agriculture. I can give that from my childhood, the taste of dal, mung dal we are getting, not today. Even the milk you are getting, if you go to early morning, not mother boils the milk with the earthen pot, and you open the pot, the taste you get, and the semi-crunchy layer you get, and color we are not getting. So don't we think that no, through our agricultural practice, cannot we regenerate the taste of food we had much before? Can we think upon this one? Yeah, thank you.
I think consumer taste is a big issue in and of itself, and consumers will basically pay a price for what they want in taste and quality of food. And I think if the current food system has moved in one direction, then if consumers are accepting it and paying for it, the incentive to change is very limited. And I'm speaking to you directly as an economist at the moment. But I want to make another point. We may have had certain foods 50 years ago, but the diversity of food that's available in the market today is significantly higher than it was 50 years ago. The amount of food that's coming from all sorts of sources into the market is very different today. For example, 50 years ago, you could not go into a small town market in India and get apples. Today you can. And I'm just giving you that as an example. I'm not promoting apples. But that type of diversity that's come into the food system, I think has not been appreciated enough. There's a much greater variety of food that's available, even in small rural markets than we had in the past. So there may be a certain nostalgia, but the nostalgia may be different from the reality of what's available. I know I'm not answering your question, but there's a bigger issue that one can talk about.
Thank you, Professor Pingale, for very illuminating lecture. I have one question. A long time ago, I studied Fateh Singh Kapurwa with biogas plant. This was one of the primary thing introduced in community development, you would recall. Now, the question is that if biogas plants were were not kept alive because of not that LPG was available. I don't think that time LPG was available, particularly in rural areas. It was because the cattle, the dung they required was too much and small farmers could not afford that. That was the reason given to me in Fateh Singh Kapurwa. Thank you. What is your thought on that?
So I've actually, when I was much younger, I was looking at this. There was a time when biogas plants were promoted quite a bit. This would have been in the late 60s and 70s. And then they kind of disappeared fairly quickly. And there's a variety of reasons for them disappearing. One, as you rightly said, cattle populations were dropping as mechanization increased. That's one, and we have a really nice map on our website, which actually shows you the drop in cattle populations over time in India. That's one thing that definitely happened. The second thing that happened was wage rates started to go up, and labor for maintaining these plants was becoming more expensive. And at the same time, LPG cylinders started to come in. LPG cylinders started to come in by about the mid-70s. And they came in at the same time as road and transport infrastructure was improving across the country. And so it was easy to put these LPG cylinders on a bus and get them into villages where consumers were using them. And it was a dynamic across all of this that resulted in the disappearance of these small scale biogas plants. But I think there's opportunities with new technologies to look at different models for revitalizing them, not necessarily at a household level. But there are different ways to think about it as you look ahead.
Okay, we take the last question, ML.
Thank you, Dr. Prabhu, ML from ICRISAT. As always, we enjoy your presentation. Just one, guidance from your side. You've been focusing and putting all your effort toward zero hunger with zero carbon. Those are the key words. So from that perspective, what systemic changes are needed, with respect to regenerative agriculture if you target the zero hunger with zero carbon?
I think if I had to pinpoint one big ticket item that needs to be addressed, and that big ticket item is rice production systems. And I'm not saying get out of rice production. What I'm saying is there are opportunities for being a lot more sustainable and a lot more smarter in rice production systems that will use less amount of water, less amount of fertilizers, and certainly much lower amounts of energy for tillage, etc., that contribute directly to the zero hunger, zero carbon goal. And they can be areas such as dry season rice production in the dryland areas, switching to other crops, and that crop diversity contributes to the overall reduction in carbons and addresses at the same time the zero hunger goal. So I think I would focus on rice as a primary area for this issue. And the second is livestock. But livestock is, I know less about livestock, and I think in the room, there may be others who know more about it. But livestock management is a major area one would want to look at. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Prabhu, for a wonderful talk. We all participants really got benefited a lot from this. And thank you for joining us so early hours from US, just before 7 o'clock in the morning. Thank you very much. Dr. Praveen Rao, thank you very much for chairing this session and also putting that synthesis from Dr. Prabhu's presentation. Thank you very much for all your support. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, Hari. You want the session?
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone, and good morning for those who are attending virtually. So we came almost close to the end of the day, a very riveting day. We had around 14 presentations across 4 different themes, plus one very special address by Professor Prabhu Pingali, especially on the implications of regenerative agriculture on food and nutritional security and the policy and opportunities. So if you look at the take-home messages across the 14 presentations spread across in 4 different themes, one of the most important take-home message that is cutting across all the presentations is when the farmer is facing multitude of problems, when the soils are sick, when the soils are lacking soil microbial diversity, when the soils are deficient in micronutrients, and when the water scarcity is there. So such kind of multitude problems are there. Regenerative agriculture is a way forward. So that's the one important crux for today's presentations. And we have seen many evidences how regenerative agriculture is replenishing the soil health, how it is helping the water management, soil management, and how it is improving the soil microbial diversity. So there are some very good success stories we have seen in the morning, one from Rajasthan, and followed by one success story from government of, especially in Andhra Pradesh, where Raitu Sadhikara Samstha, in collaboration with government of Andhra Pradesh, is doing in a massive scale, promoting natural farming, and how the farmers are benefiting as well as the environment is benefiting. We have seen from the presentations. And then there is one presentation followed by it is clearly mentioning that business as usual approach doesn't work actually. So piecemeal compartmental approach doesn't work actually for the today's agriculture. We need a kind of holistic approach. So we need to address many things in one go. We need to address the water, we need to address the soil, and we need to address climate change, and we need to address the wastewater, especially in the rural areas. So that's how, so we have to move forward. And then followed by few set of presentations which probably gave some evidences how the regenerative agriculture practices are reducing greenhouse gas emissions and carbon credits, and how ecosystem services are coming into picture. Though ecosystem services is a very new thing and still it's in infancy, but very important subject, we need to look into it actually going forward. And the evidence is clearly mentioning that the natural farming and practicing regenerative agriculture practices across India in several parts of the country has clearly showing that the organic carbon content is increasing. So that's what actually, when one of the presenter has clearly analyzed more than 5 crore samples in India, soil samples, and has clearly shown a path that these practices are clearly improving the organic matter content in several parts of the country. And followed that, there is a set of presentations, especially on entrepreneurial things, especially in regenerative agriculture farmers who are practicing, as well as market linkages, which is very important. And overall, one of the important message is farmer incentives. Yesterday also, we discussed a lot on this thing. If farmer penalizes with yield 20%, 30%, so what kind of incentive he or she is going to get when regenerative agriculture practices is practicing? So that's one important area. Carbon credits is showing a way forward. And apart from carbon credits, what kind of other incentives we can show to the farmers to adopt this kind of regenerative agriculture farming practices is one thing we need to look into it. And in one session, especially the plant protection and soil microbiome, one of the important key message is still we need today a lot actually in that particular area. So we haven't seen a very good data on efficacy of several botanical extracts and biological inputs actually. So that's one key thing which is missing, and a lot of research has to done in that particular area to generate enough evidence that particular biological input is really working vis-a-vis a chemical input actually. So that evidence we have to show to a farmer that this is really economical and this is working in this manner. So that's where we need to put more focus, and there is a huge gap exists in that particular area. And if I miss anything, my colleague Nedu will add to this. Thank you.
Thanks, Hari. Yeah, so Hari has given a very comprehensive summary of the take-home messages. The one thing maybe I want to add from the today's discussion is the last session when we talk about a lot of our colleagues and friends from industries who are working in the organic farm space. They came and presented or gave their lessons on the challenges what they are facing. So from that, I want to pick up 2-3 important points which we need to keep in mind when we are discussing tomorrow about the developmental gaps and policy gaps which we want to highlight in this workshop. The one important point what they raised is we are now working with the smallholder farmers, and then they said that there is a lack of marketable surplus. So they have an aggregation problem. So if we want to scale up for the natural farming or regenerative farming, how we can address this issue, especially on aggregation. So some of even from Samruti, they are saying that they are working with FAO, maybe one of the solution for linking smallholders for aggregation. So we need to think around that, how we can build those experiences. And then the other one is mostly right now they have pointed out that the farmers are not well connected with the retailers or processors. So mostly in between the traders are there. So there is a lot of trust on the products what we are claiming natural farming. So how that natural farming or natural product can be claimed, or it's under a threat, or it's under a question. So we need to work around that, how we can build the trust with the producers and then the consumers. So that is one of the areas where we need to keep our thinking around. The other important thing is on the tenancy farming. As we see that the farming are now currently moving away from family farming to tenancy, a lot of tenant farmers are coming and farming. So there is a demand for labor. So that the family laborers are going out. And then when we are promoting natural farming or regenerative agriculture, where there is demand for farmers are higher. So we need to think around how to reform this tenancy farmer, so that, for example, when we are talking about natural farming, we are saying that there is a penalty in yield in the initial years. So if that is the case, then how we can encourage tenant farmers to take up the natural farming. So when we are talking about that, we want to do a paradigm shift in going with the natural farming, then this will be a important point we need to think around. So these are some of the key points which I want to add in addition to what Hari said. That thanks everyone for a wonderful presentation. We learned a lot from you in this 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hari and Nedu. Just for me also to add that, again, I'm always concerned about the consumer. So what really is it going to be regenerative agriculture for the consumer? And how much will he be willing to pay for that? Yeah, I think already we are struggling with organic farming, what a premium price is and what really is in there, because they might not be necessarily concerned about ecological benefits. Okay, so thanks very much, all of you once again. For this evening, we have a dinner at the Rendezvous Lounge at 7:30 p.m. as usual. And then you have the same breakfast tomorrow morning at the same place.